The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of Spaced Out Radio or Spaced Out Radio Limited is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced?
Stop right there!
From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
They let us play with all our toys, they let us think that we're big boys, they let us make a lot of noise, but we ain't rule the world. They let us think we're Superman.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on iTunes and TuneIn. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
Dave, oh Dave, are you playing with Bigfoot and aliens again?
Dad, you gotta stop haunting the ghost. It's scaring them.
All right, seriously, put down the pointy sticks.
Okay! Game on!
Game on!
Game on!
The password is...
All right.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio. Mr. Bumblefoot, Dave is ready for liftoff.
Seriously, Dave? Really? Aren't you a little old for a tinfoil hat?
Hello. Toby. Bye-bye. Love you. Bye-bye.
Please take your seat on my way. We're with the engine. Prepare for takeoff. Start. 2, 1. Boost ignition and liftoff.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio. Tonight I am your host, Dave Scott. It's great to have you along for the ride on this Wednesday, December 13th. Thursday, December 14th, if you're on the East Coast or across the pond, hope you had a great day and night. We are live right here in the Great White North, on top of the mountains of central British Columbia. We are here for you 7 days a week. We welcome in everyone and say hello to everyone at WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network. Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live at spaceoutradio.com, Spreaker, KTLK, The Fringe.fm, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Like our music, get your horns up for Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy and Sons of Apollo. Bumblefoot is the official music of this show. Now, we're all over social media. I'd love it for you to follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio. You can go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio to find it nice and easy. We're on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website, once it's up and running, it's being fixed right now from last week's hacking incident, is spacedoutradio.com. We also are very thankful to the following people: Brian, Milo, Aussie Rob, Canadian Joe, and Robin for donating to our GoFundMe account right now, gofundme.com/We Own the Night. We are raising money to improve the studio and sound quality of this show so we can take it more terrestrially. If you have an opportunity to help on out, we would greatly appreciate that. Now, we have 2 chat rooms for you to participate in. If you want to get in touch with tonight's guest, since you know we don't take phone calls around here, you can either be signed into the SOR Space Travelers group on Facebook or on Spreaker. Or if you prefer Twitter, just use the hashtag SpaceOutRadio. I will get to your questions and comments in there as well. Now, normally we have a plethora of features to offer you on our website, but once again, our website is currently being rebuilt, and we're hoping to have it up and running within the next day or two. You know, sometimes when you get hacked good, and we got hacked pretty darn good. So we are efforting to get it back up here ASAP. If you look at the last 25 years, Hollywood has produced some of their highest grossing revenued movies on the topics of aliens and UFOs. Ever since Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Hollywood, and more so the purchasing audience, has had a real lust for movies with extraterrestrial themes. The success has been questioned by the field of ufology as to why. Is there some sort of message that maybe government officials are trying to get through to Hollywood, and maybe even video games as well? Talking about this tonight is our guest for the next 2 hours, author Robbie Graham. His book, Silverscreen Saucers, Sorting Fact from Fantasy in Hollywood's UFO Movies, can be found at any major book company online. It's an interesting topic because, like I said above, many ufologists, from Richard Dolan to Grant Cameron, believe the government uses Hollywood to get the extraterrestrial message across that it wants. But over the last couple of decades, have you noticed there's been very few movies depicting aliens as benevolent beings? Is there a pattern here? Let's find out. Tonight's guest, author Robbie Graham. Robbie, welcome to Spaced Out Radio for the first time. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me on the show.
You know what? I want to start off with a little bit of congratulations to you, because I heard through the grapevine, little birdie told me, that you got down on one knee to the girlfriend the other day, and she said yes.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, thanks very much. Well, okay. Yeah, thanks very much.
Well, we like to try and stay on top of these things, you know.
Yeah, no, very happy, thank you.
Wonderful, and congratulations to you and your starting family. Have you guys picked out a date yet, or is it still way too new?
No, it's not yet, but yeah, it's probably within the next year or so, hopefully.
Excellent. Rob, what got you interested in the field of ufology? Was this something that personal experience led you to this, or was it just the topics that really got you going on it because it's just so intriguing?
I've always been interested in weird things, UFOs, aliens, Bigfoot, poltergeists since a young age, since I was probably sort of 7 or 8 years old, and starting to read books on the subject from around that age. But it was around sort of age 14, 15 that I became really, really interested or obsessed even with UFOs, and I started to consume all the literature around that age. And then by sort of 16 or 17, I was I was properly into the subject. I was attending a local UFO group where I met Nick Redfern actually for the first time, because Nick was fairly local to me at the time. And so I was sort of hooked really by that point, and was convinced of certain things about the subject by a certain age, and then over the years sort of shed a certain amount of my firmly held beliefs about the subject, and I'm sort of in a different place now to where I was even just a few years ago. But in my late teens, early 20s, I also started to have a serious interest in film studies academically, and I studied film at university and college, and then in my mid-20s I started to decide to combine my passion for film and UFOs, and I started a blog called Silverscreen Saucers, looking at the cultural and political interplay between UFOs and Hollywood, because no one else seemed to be doing this in a focused way at the time. It's still an overlooked aspect of ufology, the influence of cinema, really. So that turned into a book eventually, Silverscreen Saucers, which was published in 2015. And so it's been an ongoing interest for me, this interplay between UFOs and Hollywood, and I think there's a lot to talk about, and there's a lot of misunderstandings, I think, about this interplay.
When you looked at it, did you find any anomalous type patterns in regards to your research as you started looking into how Hollywood played a role in this?
Well, it's actually difficult to identify patterns with this. I think, as I said, there's a lot of assumptions, beliefs about the nature of this interplay between UFOs and Hollywood, and there's a lot of conspiratorial thinking surrounding UFOs and Hollywood. And it's true that in certain respects there has been concerted government influence and monitoring of UFO themed entertainment products in Hollywood dating back to 1950. So obviously the modern phenomenon boomed into our popular consciousness in 1947, and then it was until it was just 3 years later, actually, in 1950, that Hollywood started to engage with this emerging folklore, I suppose, this emerging thing that we now call ufology. And right from that point, the US government, and specifically the Air Force, became very interested in how Hollywood was engaging with this, because, of course, at the time, UFOs were quite a serious concern for elements within the US power structures. And so they recognized, of course, that Hollywood was hugely, hugely influential on a global scale. And they were concerned, this is my theory, that obviously they couldn't really get a grasp of what they were dealing with. The powers that be, so to speak, couldn't really grasp what they were dealing with in terms of the UFO phenomenon. And they were concerned that Hollywood's projection of certain ideas about this phenomenon might be problematic. And so they wanted to, as with any aspect of culture and life, really, they wanted to exert some influence about how we perceive certain things. And so that wasn't too hard for them to do, because by 1951 the CIA had a concerted influence within the entertainment industry, a covert level, obviously. The Air Force was also had also developed relationships by that point, because, of course, the Air Force and the Department of Defense more broadly, as it would later become, was involved in Hollywood throughout the Second World War in a big way, in a propagandist capacity. So they already had their hooks in the industry, so to speak, and so it wasn't too hard for them to exert influence on this subject. The original policy for the Department of Defense, as officially stated, was to downplay, debunk, and demystify UFOs, and that was in accordance with the CIA Robertson Panel's recommendations of 1953. And so pretty much any Hollywood movie or TV product throughout the 1950s and 60s that sought to engage with aspects of ufology was as I say, the subject was either those films were either denied permission, denied cooperation rather from the Department of Defense in order to stifle their production, or their content was sort of muffled, shall we say? So what happened? I mean, there's numerous examples I've documented over the years, and others have documented as well. Quite concrete cases where the DoD, specifically the Air Force, usually has involved itself in productions and to an extent censored them or tweaked their content in accordance with the Robertson panel recommendations quite broadly. So that was the policy throughout the 50s and 60s, to debunk and to demystify. As the years went on, it seemed that the policy started to shift, and then it starts to become more speculative as to why and to what end and how even. And so there is a huge amount of speculation involved in this, in trying to figure out, the ultimate agenda when it comes to UFOs in Hollywood, and if there isn't indeed an agenda. And the question ultimately you can boil it down to is the content of Hollywood UFO movies the result of an overarching Hollywood UFO conspiracy, or is it more a natural cultural process where industry executives and writers and producers and directors simply move in accordance with popular trends, and respond to audience demands, etc. And I think the answer is largely that it's a natural cultural process. However, there are very clear examples smattered throughout the decades where movies and TV products have been manipulated, and so that's very significant to my mind. And certainly the Department of Defense, the Air Force, and other agencies, pretty much every agency now in the US government has had some influence in some UFO or alien-themed product, and that seems to have intensified over the past 10, 15 years or so.
Did you think it was the government that caught on to what Hollywood was doing, or do you think they noticed the amount of people generating sales for these movies, or do you think that they're the ones who stepped up and said, this is a good way for us to get our own personal information out there?
A bit of all of that, I think. What I do say is that, regardless of government involvement, Hollywood executives, the studio system at the time, the industry more broadly, would have been producing UFO-themed content right from the get-go, because Hollywood creatives would have recognized without the government that UFOs, that flying saucers as they were then known, were sellable. They were all over the tabloids, they were making headlines, and worldwide, and especially within the United States, beginning in 1947 onwards and throughout the 1950s. And so, of course, industry creatives would have wanted to engage with this this emerging obsession and exploit it. So, as I say, without the government, Hollywood would continue to make these movies. I think if you had removed all government influence from these products at the time, then I think probably you would have had more interesting products and more varied products. But certainly at the time, throughout the 50s, these films were characterized as being typically B movies, low budget productions that were quite silly in their tone and content, and certainly they didn't lend any credibility to the reality of the phenomenon as was being reported at the time. So again, is that a natural cultural trend, or is that just something that is representative of low sophistication on the part of the writers, or is it something that was encouraged at a higher level to kind of poo-poo the subject and ridicule it through the context in which it was presented? Again, there's nothing on paper besides the Robertson panel recommendations of 1953, this broad generalized statement that this phenomenon should be debunked and demystified through media channels. But as for sort of individual examples of filmmakers directly adhering to that recommendation, there's only really one very significant one, and that was a Walter Cronkite documentary called UFO Friend, Foe, or Fantasy that was made in the 1960s, about 13 years after the Robertson panel had made its recommendations. And we have it in writing that the producers of the show admitted that it was made in accordance with those recommendations of the CIA Robertson panel to debunk and to demystify. And that was, as I say, that was 13 years after those recommendations were being made. So it stands to reason that if that one show was doing it, if that one documentary was doing it, then others were doing it and other productions were doing it as well. There's another example from the late 1950s of a TV show called Steve Canyon, which was a comic strip serial based on this comic book called Steve Canyon about this adventurous Air Force pilot. And that ran for a couple of seasons in 1958-59. And that show was sort of sponsored by the Air Force. And so, of course, the Air Force had considerable control over its script content episode by episode. And the writers, they were not with the Air Force. The writers were independent writers within Hollywood, but they had to have all that material vetted by the Air Force. And so they recognized that the saucer craze was not going away, and they wanted to engage with that. And they wrote an episode called, I think, Project UFO in 1958-59. And they, of course, had to submit that script about UFOs to the Air Force, and the Air Force were not happy with it at all. And so I managed to secure multiple draft versions of that script from the Milton Caniff estate, who owned Steve Canyon, and I looked at all of those different drafts and see how they were changed by the Air Force from the first draft to the one that was finally broadcast. Well, actually not broadcast, because ultimately they never broadcast that episode. They stuck it on a shelf because they were so frightened by it, and then it only emerged years later. But it was only broadcast years later, after the show had actually been officially cancelled. But what was, it was pretty tame content. But the Air Force were worried about it. They didn't want that script lending any credibility whatsoever to the notion that UFOs might be a serious subject or a real phenomenon. And so they laced the script with lots of sort of allusions to hoaxes and to charlatans and things like that. So that by the time the episode was over, the subject just seemed very, very silly, whereas in the original script, the characters treated it a little bit more seriously.
Where does Hollywood get their information from? Are they working with ufologists? Are they working with government officials? Because there are so many little nuances that seem so real, maybe weeks or years later after the film. And I bring into perspective, for me, I went to school for journalism, and I remember when Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy, came out, and to everybody it was a comedy, but if you've worked in a newsroom, there was all of these little nuances in there that you could tell that they did their homework, because there were scenarios in there that the majority of people would never understand unless you've worked in a newsroom before. So where is Hollywood getting all of this little insider information from?
Well, I don't think a lot of it is insider information. I think people assume that it is, and I don't think people often give people in Hollywood enough credit as creative individuals and people who do their research. People in Hollywood are not. They're just the same as anyone else. It's just that they happen to work within that industry. They have the same access to this information as any person who's interested in the subject. They read the same books as the UFO buff does. They visit the same internet sites as the UFO buff does. They listen to the same radio shows and podcasts. They attend the same conferences, or at least they can attend those same conferences. As with any subject, whenever a script writer is working on something, they do their research. It's in their interests and in the dramatic interests of the script that they do their research on the subject that they're engaging with. And the same is true of UFOs. They immerse themselves in the subculture. They familiarize themselves with the history of the subject, and they use that for dramatic purposes. They, and this is, and the aspect of this that interests me is the process by which sort of historical fact, so to speak, becomes popular fantasy through this process of Hollywoodization, where Hollywood creatives, screenwriters, etc., they engage with this fringe, so-called, sort of fringe ideas within ufology, which aren't really known by the mainstream, and then they incorporate those ideas into their dramatic narratives. And through that process, through that projection of those ideas through the Hollywood product, we receive them through the value of that medium, and the value of the cinematic medium is, we consider it to be fantasy. We consider it to be a form of mass public fantasy, and typically associated with fiction. And so, especially when these ideas are presented in the genre of science fiction, which they always are, because UFO movies fall within that genre, they fall under that umbrella, then we receive those ideas, which were once part of our lived historical reality, as fantasy, and so slowly but surely the original sort of factual basis for the UFO phenomenon becomes fictionalized in the popular consciousness, and so that fascinates me, and it's very hard to unravel it, to go back through the decades and to try to identify where and how specific ideas became fantasy, really, and then to try and identify what the fact was in the first place. And so that's something that's always drawn me to this subject. But yeah, as far as Hollywood writers are concerned, for the most part, they have an interest. They have an interest in this subject, and they seek to. But what sort of frustrates me, or used to frustrate me, was that in the interviews that I've conducted with various Hollywood filmmakers, I've found that those people who have made Hollywood products, like Roswell, for example, the famous Roswell movie with Kyle MacLachlan and Martin Sheen, that was the film that was in 1994, produced and written by Paul Davids, and that was the film that was chiefly responsible for popularizing the Roswell incident in the mainstream. Before that, not too many people outside of ufology had heard of Roswell. That was the one that thrust it out there to millions of people on the Showtime TV channel, and it also, really put it on the map within the UFO field as well, because it was still not a huge thing at that time. People were discussing it, obviously, in the UFO community, and had been for quite some time, but it hadn't become the defining subject within the community until just shortly prior to that. But that film, so of course that had a huge cultural impact. And it was, as I say, written by Paul Davids, who himself is a UFO experiencer, or a UFO witness, rather. He and his daughter witnessed a UFO, had a sort of a classic close encounter near their house, and that inspired him to consume all the literature and to go on this journey to discover what UFOs were. And so that film is sort of a direct result of his own experience. And so he just happened to be a Hollywood screenwriter who'd had these experiences, and of course other screenwriters will have had these experiences too. Hollywood writers and directors and producers, they also see UFOs like anyone else, and so we don't really know how much of this is based on personal experience or inspired by personal experience, or just something that is an outside intellectual curiosity, and they recognize that this subject sells because it does sell. If you look at the top 100 or top 50 most successful films of all time at the box office, you'll count a good number of them as being related to aliens or alien visitation, and sometimes specifically UFOs. A great many of them are tremendously successful. So it's got a long and proven history at the box office, and so it makes sense that Hollywood will want to continue to engage with this subject. So with or without government influence, as I say, Hollywood is going to continue to make UFO movies, and will always have made UFO movies. But as I say, I think without government influence, you'd have probably seen more varied and interesting content, at least in those early years. So yeah, I think that we need to be careful about being too conspiratorial in our thinking about, the factors that influence the majority of these scripts. As I say, for the most part, it is, to my mind, in my research, clearly, overwhelmingly a natural cultural process. However, it's also very clear that there has been a number of concerted attempts over the decades, and certainly a very clear interest on the part of various government agencies in the content of these movies and TV shows, because, as I say, they recognise the cultural impact and reach of Hollywood. And if you want to control how people think about any subject, especially those ones which are of national security interest, then you have to control those choke points through the media.
On this show a few months ago, Bill Burns from the now defunct television show UFO Hunters, which was #1 on syndicated stations and for reality television when it was on the air, he actually stated on this show, because it was always rumored that the government pulled him off and his show off the air. And he actually confirmed that rumor and said it wasn't a rumor at all, that he actually was approached by somebody in the Men in Black who said that your show was done after this year anyways, no matter what you do or what your ratings are, so you might as well try and get as much information out there as possible. Do you think the government would love to have that kind of control over Hollywood as well?
Was Bill talking about a TV show or a radio show?
His reality TV show, UFO Hunters.
It's that's difficult to comment on from my perspective, because it's very hard to verify that kind of statement. Quite honestly, you have to be very, very cautious about that kind of thing. Again, in my experience, a lot of people in this subject automatically cry conspiracy when things sort of don't go their way. If something goes wrong with a radio show or the TV show, whatever, it's the government that's done it, as opposed to any number of other factors. That's not generally how things work in Hollywood and between the relationship between Hollywood and any official body nowadays. It's not so overt and direct as to have something pulled off the air. At least not explicitly for those reasons. It doesn't need to be like that now, because the relationship is far more sophisticated and subtle and nuanced than that. The nature of propaganda today and of manipulation is far more sophisticated than simply pulling a show or pulling a product from mass consumption, because that draws attention to itself. That's glaring and it's clumsy, and it also implies that the people who have been monitoring these things, the so-called powers that be, that they've obviously taken their eye off the ball in order to allow a show like this to be greenlit in the first place. And the fact is that the CIA has control points throughout the industry and has done for decades and decades and decades. And so, there will be, I lay out this theory in my Silverscreen Saucers book, whereby people within the agency will be dotted throughout all of the major choke points in the entertainment industry, from script vetting in the very beginning, to even script writers, to network, everything up to network executives, and everything in between. And again, there is some examples that is actually the case. And so, obviously, that's not to say that everyone in the industry is an operative, because that's just not the case at all. It's very, very far from that. You don't need to have total infiltration. You don't need to have, complete. You don't need to have all of your agents, like hundreds and hundreds of agents within the industry, or even thousands of agents. You just need to have a handful in the right places in order to exert the necessary influence, and that's what's always been done. So it's extremely. It seems very implausible to me that. If there's an agency out there that's concerned about the content of a TV show called UFO Hunters, and that project would have been in development for months, if not years, in advance of production, then they would have sort of stepped in way before it had gone to series and never mind gone to multiple series and things like that, and then to pull it again, it doesn't really. That's just not how the industry works. You don't just sort of have some CIA guy come in and say, "I don't like the content of your show. We're going to pull it because it's violating national security." It doesn't really work like that. It's far more sophisticated. It's far more subtle than that. And to be honest, it's no longer really about censorship, because again, the example you've used there implies direct censorship. And again, certainly in my research over the years, you see very, very few, if any, cases today and over the past several decades of overt direct censorship. It's no longer about that. You had censorship in the 50s and 60s and occasionally perhaps even into the early 70s. But by that point, the agenda seemed to have changed from censorship and debunking and demystifying through to a more subtle agenda of perception management, whereby they recognized that they couldn't stop people believing in UFOs because people continued to see and report UFOs around the world. The phenomenon itself seems to be ontologically real or objectively real, even if only culturally. People continue to report it en masse all over the world. And so you can't disprove a phenomenon that people continue to experience. But what you can do, they recognized, was that you can control how people perceive the phenomenon. Okay, you can influence how people perceive the phenomenon, and you can do that largely through channels of mass media. And so the agenda seemed to change, and it was no longer about sort of saying, this doesn't exist. It was about saying, okay, we recognize that maybe this does exist. We're not going to try and encourage you to believe that UFOs don't exist. We're going to just sort of encourage you to believe certain things about the phenomenon that best serve us, okay, that portray us in the best possible light, as in terms of our historical engagement with the phenomenon. And we're going to try to sow certain ideas through the UFO community into pop culture, through the through Hollywoodization of these ideas, and we can use that for all sorts of ends. Again, and I document some of this in the book, quite extensively actually, and I've laid this out in various articles and talks and things like that. And so it's no longer about just sort of dismissing the subject. It's about sort of in many ways actively encouraging a belief in it, but it's about steering the belief towards certain ends that are often self-serving for the national security state.
Do you think that maybe those who could be involved are maybe using this as a time-honored way to create some sort of soft disclosure for UFOs? Again, I have real trouble with the term disclosure, with the notion of disclosure even. I think it's hugely simplified. It assumes a great many things about the phenomenon. It assumes a great many things about official knowledge of and interaction with the phenomenon and control over the phenomenon. I think that disclosure, as it's commonly understood or defined by people like Steve Bassett and by the exopolitical community, for example, is tremendously naive and virtually an impossibility, because I think it makes a great many assumptions that are misplaced. And I think that again, there were a number of examples in the dating to the 1950s, and there were some smattered throughout the 70s and even in the 80s and even in the 90s, arguably as well, where you could point to certain products in television and cinema, but particularly in television, in the documentary format, which seemed to be either testing public reaction to the idea of alien contact, or sowing particular ideas about that scenario for various reasons. And these date back to sort of the mid-1950s with the famous Disney animator Ward Kimball, who, again, Grant Cameron's looked at this and others have looked at this, where in about 1955, Ward Kimball and Disney himself were approached by the Air Force, who were seeking to, in their words, make a documentary about UFOs that would help acclimate the public to the reality of the phenomenon. And Disney agreed to make this documentary with the Air Force because, of course, Disney had a long history of cooperation with the Air Force and the military dating back to World War II. And they started to do conceptual designs about how these aliens might look and things like that. And this is all according to the testimony of Ward Kimball, who died some years ago. But Kimball testified to this in 1979 at a MUFON conference, actually. And so that's a very interesting case, and there's no reason to doubt that what Ward Kimball said was true. But the documentary never came to fruition because at the last minute, the Air Force pulled their cooperation and said, well, we were going to give you this exclusive UFO footage for inclusion in the documentary, but we're not going to give you anything anymore. And that's the end of that. They've obviously sort of changed their mind, and so the documentary sort of was mothballed, and it actually ultimately seemed to develop into another series, a famous Disney series called Man in Space, Man on the Moon, and where Disney was making a series of short films about just those subjects, but without the alien element, although there was some sort of brief allusions to and references to aliens in those products as well. And then you had the case in 1974, the Robert Emenegger documentary UFOs Past, Present and Future, which is extremely interesting and significant, and I look at that in great detail in the book. And I interviewed Robert Emenegger, the producer of that documentary, and yeah, I mean that's a document that's
a rare case where you had every branch of the military actively involved and openly involved in the production of a documentary that seemed to be really pushing the idea that we're not alone in the universe, and not only that we've been visited by aliens and that there's an ongoing contact occurring. And that was seemed to have been encouraged by the CIA. It seems to have been the brainchild of the CIA, and it was supported by the US Air Force largely, and shot at various US Air Force bases, including Norton Air Force Base and Holloman Air Force Base. They were given unprecedented access to DoD facilities, including the Pentagon itself, and they shot footage within the Pentagon. They interviewed all of the heads of Project Blue Book, former heads of Project Blue Book, and they also interviewed William Coleman, the spokesman for Blue Book. And that was an absolutely fascinating documentary. NASA even gave the cooperation to it. And according to Emenegger, it was signed off on by the head of the Air Force himself, Robert Siemens at the time. So that was, and so, what was the agenda there? And of course, what was famous about that case was that, again, the Air Force, as in the 1950s, had allegedly promised the filmmakers real UFO footage for inclusion in the documentary. And in this case, it wasn't just UFO footage, it was supposedly alien landing footage of these beings exiting a craft at Holloman Air Force Base in the date wasn't specified really. But of course, there's been rumors about Holloman Air Force Base and President Eisenhower and, all sorts of things over the years. But so that was a very strange case. The documentary was ultimately released and was nominated for a Golden Globe in the mid-1970s, but it was released without the promised footage. And instead of the footage, they had to do a dramatic recreation as described to them by the Air Force of this alien landing. What was the agenda with this documentary? Was it to acclimate people to the idea of alien life? Or was it to sow certain ideas about the phenomenon into the popular consciousness for perhaps psychological warfare reasons, both foreign and abroad? And again, this is something I explore in the book. The psychological warfare dimension of this. This is something that's been explored again in detail by people like Mark Pilkington in Mirage Men, and in other products as well. There were a number of examples in the 1980s and a couple in the 1990s, sort of echoing similar themes and ideas, where you seem to have intelligence community involvement in TV products about UFOs that were pushing very specific ideas about an alleged relationship between the US government and alien entities. And again, you can start to really chart the development of that narrative, beginning in the early 1980s, really, through the 1990s, solidifying in the 1990s, and really, by that point it had become part of pop culture and sort of defined the UFO mythology. But when you trace it back to its roots, very tellingly, it goes back to the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, and it seems that a very particular narrative was being very consciously sown and pushed through the UFO community and ultimately through pop culture as well. And what it did was simplified our perceptions of the phenomenon and served to, by this point, as I said, they'd given up on trying to debunk and demystify. They knew that people were resolute in believing in the phenomenon, but what they could do was they could perceive how people they could manage how people perceived the phenomenon, and they could use that for all sorts of reasons. They could see how ideas were spread within a controllable belief system, such as ufology. They could sort of push certain ideas through media channels that would be received in certain ways by foreign enemy powers, again for psychological warfare reasons. So they recognise that within the ufology, although that is based on, this is the frustrating thing, the UFO phenomenon. The ufology, for all of its infuriating aspects, and there are many, does seem to have been sprung from a historically real phenomenon, one that continues to affect people's lives on an individual basis. But it's become, it's just its own worst enemy now, and it probably always has been, but especially since the dawn of the internet, ufology has just become a total minefield. And as I say, I'm really uncomfortable even with the term ufology, because it implies some level of organization and demonstrable research, provable by solid case studies and things like that. And it's very hard actually when you get down to it to really point to even one case which is universally acceptable. And so it's very, very frustrating, and that's something that I've started to look at in my more recent research, starting to sort of pick apart what is ufology, why do we believe what we believe, what's left when we really be critical about the subject, what remains, and how can we best move forward with trying to understand what seems to be a real phenomenon.
So when you look at the way these stories are written, one of the topics that has caught me off guard recently, if you go back to the original Men in Black movie, Robbie, where Tommy Lee Jones picks up a National Enquirer type magazine and tells Will Smith, this is where the government drops its UFO stories and nobody ever believes it. They all think it's a rag magazine, so everybody thinks it's absolutely fake. Yet in the last week and a half or so, I've actually had 2 guests tell me that the government is doing that. What do you think about that?
Well, that is true, and that's true. Again, that's so the writers of Men in Black. Of course, Men in Black was based on a comic book rather. But but when that was adapted for the big screen, of course, that was 1997. That film came out, and that was really at the peak. 97, 1998 was kind of the peak of UFO saturation in pop culture. You had the X-Files was at its peak at that point. You had movies like Contact, you had movies like Independence Day, Men in Black, and it was everyone by that point had some concept of all of the sort of cornerstones of UFO culture. Roswell, Area 51. It was all very much part of pop culture by that point, and that was the peak year, probably 1997, and so. The literature was everywhere. You'd go into any bookstore and you'd be able to read, to choose out dozens of books exploring the UFO history and cases and things like that. And so again, the writers of these products were very much engaged with that. They were looking to UFO literature for inspiration, for creative inspiration. And so ideas about the National Enquirer, for example, and other tabloid rags and things like that, having been infiltrated by the CIA, that was something that was documented. That was part of the actual historical record years before, before people started, tapping into that in the 90s with their cultural references. That was something that was already part of the historical record. So there's nothing sort of conspiratorial about that. That was known that the CIA did that. They successfully infiltrated pretty much every single print product in the United States. And they'd done that by the mid 50s at the latest. The CIA was so successful in infiltrating the news media in terms of magazines, newspapers, radio shows, the television, everything. They had operatives all throughout the industry at that point, and that's why it was so easy for them to sort of manipulate content when it came to UFOs as well. But it wasn't just UFOs; they were manipulating content about all sorts of relatively innocuous stuff, which they felt was in the national interest, and so. So yeah, that was just sort of a casual reference that makes that's fun within that script. But I'm sorry, what was what did you ask again about?
I was just surprised that other researchers believed this to be true, because I had never heard that.
Yeah,
and I remember it coming. And I remember it coming out in the original Men in Black movie, and I was like, "You got to be serious! Like that has to be a joke."
Yeah. Well, no, that's just sort of a generalized reference to the fact that going back to the 1950s, as is now documented, the CIA in particular was very interested in debunking and demystifying, and they recognized that by associating a phenomenon with kind of schlock ideas and with sensationalist publications and things like that, people would not take it seriously. So you didn't want serious articles about UFOs appearing in serious academic journals and newspapers and stuff. You wanted sensationalist stories in ridiculous publications, and they recognized that that's how, if people receive it in that way, then people don't take it seriously. So no, that is true. I mean, that's absolutely true. And again, it's not a matter of speculation that the CIA and the Air Force were doing this. They were doing this very successfully, going back to 1950 really. But it became more interesting, as I say, when they stopped, when they sort of they recognized eventually that they couldn't control how, they couldn't encourage people not to believe but rather they could encourage people to believe in a certain way. And that's when it became far more interesting for me, but also more frustrating because it's harder to pin things down in terms of documentation, in terms of how these changes were made, and the ultimate agenda. And so, it's very hard to draw very solid conclusions. Other than the only thing we can say for sure, looking at the historical record, is that beginning in 1950, really 1951, the entertainment industry was being exploited, censored, manipulated for various reasons, and particularly toward for censorship reasons, by the Air Force, by the CIA, and by a number of other agencies, also the FBI as well. And so we can say that with certainty. What we can say with certainty as well is that the relationship between Hollywood and the Department of Defense and lots of other government agencies continues to thrive today, and is actually far more healthy today than it's probably ever been since the Second World War. In Hollywood, in the heart of Hollywood, in the Oppenheimer Tower, there is a whole floor in that building which is occupied by the U.S. government and military. Pretty much every branch of the military has a representative within this building on this floor, a Hollywood liaison who work sort of 24/7 with the industry, seeking to put their ideas across and seed them into Hollywood scripts. And that's not a secret. That's open. That's legal. That's all above board. And that's the nature of Hollywood, of the relationship between Hollywood and Washington today. It's a sort of an open one. It's sort of like, they're not sort of trying to be all shady and shadowy about it. They openly want to put their ideas and propaganda into Hollywood products. So the relationship, as I'm sure a lot of listeners will understand, is one whereby, for example, if a movie script necessitates the involvement of the US military, for example, through the use of hardware like tanks, planes, military personnel, access to military bases and things like that to enhance the realism of the script, then oftentimes they've got two choices. One, they can create all those things in a computer and use CGI, and that can often be quite expensive and often not very realistic, or they can approach the military and use those things in actuality. And when they approach the military will say, yes, you can use our hardware and our personnel and benefit from our advice, but in exchange for that, we need access to the script, and you have to sign a contract with us. And when you sign that contract with us, you basically have to follow all of our guidelines. And at that point, you're sort of working with the military, and you've engaged in modern propaganda, because at that point, your script is vetted by the military, and that's how Hollywood has worked for years. That relationship really began to thrive it had been going on for years, but it really began to kind of solidify in 1986 with Top Gun, Tom Cruise movie, which was the most successful film of that year, and which boosted Navy recruitment like 500% in the weeks following its release, because it was basically just a massive commercial for the Navy, and that was because the Navy basically wrote the script. And that's happened numerous times since then. And when you've got such heavy military influence in Hollywood scripts, of course, and when those scripts dabble with the subject of UFOs, then of course that subject, UFOs, is also then subject to manipulation and tampering and censorship or tweaking here and there. And that has happened over the years. The Transformers films, I don't know what we're on now, 5 or 6 now, we're on 5, I think. The Transformers films have all had extreme military involvement. They've basically just served as propaganda for the US military, and they've all been shot at various American military bases, and NASA have been involved in all of them, and they're all about aliens. They're all about, they're about giant transforming robots, but those films really pull very closely from UFO lore, and they incorporate ideas of, covert contact with aliens secret relationships with aliens between the U.S. government and alien entities, secret bases, like reverse engineering of technology, all sorts of stuff, and they pull from every aspect of UFO lore. But those films are all directly supported by the military. Again, this is an example of the military sort of changing its stance on UFOs. If those Transformers films had been made in the 1950s, for example, the military would have denied their cooperation to those products in a heartbeat. They would not have had any involvement with them, and perhaps they would have even sought to stifle their production. Today, they give them their full support because they recognise that people are going to believe in this stuff regardless, and so it's better to actually have your hands directly in there, and you can manipulate how people perceive the subject that you find so interesting or troubling, and so that's what that to my mind is what is happening today, where they can more subtly control the narrative, the overarching narrative, and the mythology through pop culture.
On that note, I'm going to get you to hold on right here. Great timing on ending that, Rob, because we are going to go for our first break of the night. Author Robbie Thomas is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. His book, Silverscreen Saucers, I highly expect you to check it out, space travelers, because it's a good one. And Rob, you're breaking it out fantastically, giving a very strong point of view on both sides of the ledger. I really do appreciate that. Rob is going to be with us for one more hour tonight. Then in hour number 3 from the Paranormal Code, Rich Giordano is going to come on in, and we're going to talk more UFOs in hour number 3 as well. You are listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. More with author Robbie Graham right after this.
Hey, space travelers, it's Joe Roop, your host of Spaced Out Saturdays. Come join me as we explore the realms of the paranormal, the esoteric, and everything in between every Saturday night at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. You know the truth is out there. Don't get caught sleepwalking. Come join Spaced Out Saturdays. That's every Saturday night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, right here on SpacedOutRadio.com.
Psychic Sundays, spiritual communication, ET contact, Sasquatch in your backyard. We will have it all on Cosmic Passport with me, Elizabeth Anglin. Each Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at SpacedOutRadio.com, I will take you on a journey of enlightenment. The goal is learning from the soul on out. We'd love it if you joined our experience. Cosmic Passport, heard Sundays at SpacedOutRadio.com.
365 days a year, we're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at ufoseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at SpacedOutRadio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at SpacedOutRadio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At SpacedOutRadio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to SpacedOutRadio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over Spaced Out Radio Night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, this is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruiz, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at spacedoutradio.com.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your 4-Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
There's a lot of strange going on in this world, and we can help you find out what's going on with you. Paranormal, cryptids, UFOs in the sky, aliens in your bedroom tickling your toes. We have the investigators you need to find out the answers you deserve. All you have to do is head to spacedoutradio.com. Your information is 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report. It's free, and we're here to help.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
Do you want to know what's really going on in your world? Do you have questions about who you can trust in the mainstream media? Then look no further than the Rebel Planet. Come get the straight answers right here at spacedoutradio.com. Join me, Jamie Sexton, creator of Rebel Planet News, as I fill you in on the stories behind the stories. All you truth seekers, be sure to tune in to Rebel Planet on spacedoutradio.com the third Thursday of every month.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to the second hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, futurist Alfred Lambermont Weber is going to join us for the first couple of hours of tomorrow night's show, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time. We get going. Hopefully our website, spacedoutradio.com, will be up and running tomorrow. We are efforting to get it done as quickly as possible from the hacking incident that happened last week. We say hello to everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. Good to have you with us as well. We are also live on the Fringe.fm, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you you, the valued listener, head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Bergschrund. Bergschrund is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect live with me during the show as well. You can give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You could join us for live chat on Facebook during the show in the SOR Space Travelers group. We're on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. Our YouTube channel is youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. It's nice and simple that way. youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. We're on iHeartRadio in the United States. TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website, once it gets going once again, is spacedoutradio.com. Now, usually we have a plethora of features for you. We will get to those once we are able to get our website back up and running. We do want to mention to you as well a big thank you to Brian, Milo, Aussie Rob, Canadian Joe, and Robin for supporting us on our GoFundMe account. Go to GoFundMe/We Own the Night. That's GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night, where you can help us get bigger and better as we continue to grow this show to take it more on a terrestrial level. Tonight we are talking with author Robbie Graham. He's got a great book out called Silverscreen Saucers. I highly suggest that you take a look at it, you pick it up. You'll really enjoy the research that's coming in. Robbie's going to be with us one more hour here before we turn it over to Rich Giordano in the Paranormal Code in hour number 3. Robbie, welcome back.
Thanks so much, Dave.
You gave so much information in that first hour in regards to Hollywood and UFOs. Let's get to the people for a second. Why do you think the field of ufology, whether it's Fire in the Sky, Independence Day, even going back to Close Encounters of the Third Kind, really seems to attract people? I mean, for years, Star Wars and E.T., once again, dealing with space and extraterrestrials, were the #1 movies ever filmed. Why the fascination?
Well, I mean, the question of are we alone in the universe has always been one of the most profound, perhaps the most profound, for as long as people have been aware of their place in the in the heavens, in the universe. We've looked up to the sky and wondered what's out there. Are there other intelligent beings out there? And moreover, have they ever visited us? Is it possible that they've ever visited us? And especially that's become a more pressing question in the modern age of space travel, as we ourselves have left our planet and starting to explore elsewhere. We've started to actively wonder, are people visiting us? And especially, and then we've tied that question in with the modern UFO phenomenon, with these sightings of anomalous objects in the skies, and a lot of testimonies have come out that many have interpreted as being indicative of alien visitation and contact. But certainly, as you say, Star Wars, and you had Superman in the same year in Star Wars was 77, Superman was 78, had Close Encounters of the Third Kind in 1977 as well, and that did mark a turning point in Hollywood and in pop culture, where people started to think about UFOs and alien contact, or not in a more optimistic light. Throughout the 1950s, alien contact had been characterized as being something that was it was an invasive act. It was hostile, and we should be fearful of alien intelligences because they're either they're blobs, or they're kind of Martians who are here to abduct, experiment upon us, or invade us. And but it wasn't until sort of the 70s, and especially with Spielberg's classic Close Encounters, that we started to maybe think, well, actually, maybe this could be some kind of benevolent, angelic experience. And there were a number of films throughout the 1980s on the back of Spielberg's Close Encounters that sort of explored that more positive aspect of alien contact. And there have been a few more recently intelligent ones, looking at the idea of peaceful contact, including Arrival with Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner, which was an excellent film. You had, of course, 1997's Contact film with Jodie Foster, which is an extremely popular film based on Carl Sagan's book. But still, there haven't been too many films that explore the positive aspects or the potential positive aspects of alien contact or the more philosophical aspects of it. Typically, Hollywood prefers to write invasion scenarios because one, that they're easier to write because you don't have to be a philosopher to write them. People like explosions and they sell at the box office. It's a visual medium, and the idea of alien contact lends itself to invasion. I think, unfortunately, because I would like to see some more intelligent engagements with the idea of alien contact, and I would also like to see some more intelligent engagements with the idea of the UFO phenomenon generally, outside of the idea of alien contact. Some sort of looking at the idea of UFOs as being representative of something beyond alien contact as well. There's all sorts of ideas to explore, but again, it's hard to package those within a mainstream narrative and something that's digestible, consumable for the mainstream. And so I understand why Hollywood hasn't really done that too much. It's a risk to take. For example, in Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind, as early as 1977, Jacques Vallée was a consultant on that, or Spielberg at least consulted with Jacques Vallée on that film. And Vallée said to Spielberg, it would be great if your aliens weren't aliens, if they weren't extraterrestrials, but if they were some sort of interdimensional intelligences that were far more, sophisticated and subtle than just direct extraterrestrial contact. And Spielberg said immediately, well, that sounds like a cool idea, but I want to give people what they want and what they expect. He didn't want to challenge people too much, because the idea of UFOs has become so synonymous with extraterrestrial intelligences and contact that it's very hard to explore any other ideas beyond that. So I think that it'd be interesting to see Hollywood start to move beyond that and see what else there is to explore with UFOs. But again, it's a very hard thing to break out of, I think, at this point.
Why do you think, though, that Hollywood has pushed more of a malevolent nature with UFOs and aliens rather than something that is positive, where statistics in the UFO and alien abduction community have the positive effects being way more high in numbers than the negative? Well, I'm not sure of this. Again, on the statistics in what you're referring to, that's tricky because people who claim abduction or contact experiences, if you're looking at sort of the traditional classic abduction scenario that was popular in the sort of the 80s, 90s, and a little bit beyond, as characterized by John Mack, David Jacobs, Bud Hopkins, etc., where you had, the typical classic scenario of people being taken out of their environment, whether it be in their bed or the car or whatever, by grey, spindly entities aboard some kind of sterile environment within a craft or whatever, experimented on medically, tampered with, and then sort of returned with physical marks, etc. Those kind of, that was the scenario that defined or characterized alien contact, so-called, within the 80s and 90s. And whilst it's true that, as you say, a lot of those so-called experiences would later report positive effects or come to interpret those experiences in a positive light as a transformational experience, it's also very true that in almost all of those cases, well, I would say literally all of those cases, involved extreme trauma as well, and were utterly terrifying for the people who experienced them, whatever those experiences represent. And I'm not sure what those experiences represent. What's interesting is that, again, I can only speak from objective. I can't, I'm not an experiencer, and so I can only look at it from the outside. But the experiences that I've interviewed,
none of them really claim to have a full grasp of what they've experienced themselves. They're in search of answers. They're in search of understanding of what they've experienced, and they interpret it through a particular framework that's pushed by UFO researchers, for example. What they've experienced is obviously real and profound, and in my mind genuinely anomalous, but I think it's far more complex than how they've been led to interpret it. But what's clear is that what they've experienced is extremely traumatic, and some of the people who I've interviewed, some of the abductees, have never really come to interpret their experiences as being positive. They've had to interpret them, they've kind of been forced to interpret them as positive in some sense, because the alternative is just to be forever scarred by them. And so they sort of, they say, well, there must be something good to take away from this. Well, it's transformed me, it's made me stronger, or whatever. But ultimately, they've gone through something that's extremely traumatic. So, but again, does that mean that the experience, if we take it literally as some kind of alien abduction experience, does that mean that the abductors, the beings, whatever they are, does that mean that they are hostile, that their intent is hostile? Does that mean that their intent is to traumatize? No, it doesn't. It means that maybe we're interpreting like that, and again, it's the classic scenario of people saying, well, it's just like, human beings taking a polar bear off a polar ice cap and taking it off there for its own good, tagging it and monitoring it so that we can track the survival of the species. We don't intend to cause the polar bear harm. We don't intend to scare it, but it's scared because of what we're doing to it. We're coming out of the sky, and we're this alien force that's coming out of the sky with all this extreme, with this scary technology, and we're literally abducting it, putting it back, and the same could be happening to us. That's one popular interpretation of what's going on there. Again, I think that might be a little bit too simplistic, but maybe that's bang on the money. Maybe that's right. But again, so personal interpretation plays a part in this. Just because we find something traumatic, does it mean that the intent is hostile? No, it doesn't. Certainly, we've never been, as far as we're aware of, invaded by extraterrestrials as Hollywood envisages it. We would know about that by now. It doesn't seem like there's a hostile intent as Hollywood would imagine it. And again, this assumes that there is an intent in the first place. Again, there's a lot of assumptions that have been built up through the UFO mythology and belief systems over the years, and I think that I won't go into that because it just gets too tangential. To stick to the point, I just think why Hollywood pushes the invasion scenario is it's not so much even about pushing it. It's not like it's not like Hollywood has an agenda, when it makes these films. It's something that, as I say, the invasion scenario is naturally dramatic from a screenwriting perspective. It's easier to write an explosion than it is to write a profound philosophical debate. Horror has become increasingly popular at the box office as well. Scary movies, and aliens, the idea of an extraterrestrial technologically advanced force is pretty scary. It can be pretty scary because we're being confronted by a higher power, and all we can do is hope that it is benevolent. But if it's not, then that's a pretty terrifying prospect. It's even pretty terrifying even if they are benevolent, because of what it would do to society, and so it's naturally quite a scary scenario, and so it doesn't take much tweaking to turn that into a full-scale invasion. And again, we're in a special effects driven industry now. People expect explosions, they expect spectacle, and it lends itself to that. So it's only natural that the majority of screenwriters who engage with this subject will be very tempted to explore those aspects of the phenomenon and of the idea of alien contact. As I say, it's the extremely talented writers, the brave ones, and the brave, studios and executives who take the gamble on producing something that's more challenging and that's more outside of the box, and that doesn't play to those conventions.
So do you believe then that there really is no correlation between any sort of government conspiracy and the idea that these movies are having CIA people, NSA people, or Black Ops type people investing in what they should or should not be doing?
Well, I don't think it's as simple as, for example, it's not polarized. So it's not about. So as I say, let's go back and let's say, okay, we can state very confidently, not confidently, but certainly, that historically and presently there is significant government influence within the entertainment industry. Okay, and that this will have extended to UFO-themed entertainment products, and we know that that's the case over the years as well, and it continues to be the case. We don't know all of the ins and outs of that and the exact nature of the changes and manipulations that have been made. In some cases, we do know those, going back to the 50s and 60s. Today, we know some of those, but it's less clear. What's clear is that there is an ongoing influence, but it doesn't seem that there has ever been a clear agenda to either to demonize potential alien life, nor has there been an agenda to sort of push it the other way as being something that's angelic and portraying aliens as our saviors, etc. It seems to flip back and forth, and it's very hard to sort of pin it down and say, well, what are they doing here? If there is an agenda, what is the agenda? And it doesn't seem to be that. It seems more about, it doesn't really seem to matter whether these things are portrayed as hostile or benevolent. They're more interested, the government, so to speak, is more interested in how they are portrayed on screen, like how they themselves, how the powers that be, officialdom, is portrayed on screen in relation to the phenomenon. Right, so they're interested in painting a picture of themselves in relation to the phenomenon. Right, so let's give you some examples. So beginning in the early 1980s, you had the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. This is very well documented now. People like Richard Doty, who's just come back on the scene, by the way, in the UFO community. They started to sow particular ideas into the UFO subculture, ideas which really hadn't been discussed or even conceptualized up until this point. They started to surface in the late 70s, but in the early 1980s, they started to be seeded into the UFO community in a very concerted way, in a very ambitious and extremely successful covert operation. And the ideas that were planted by the Air Force, through the CIA most likely, were that the US intelligence community, the US government, the US military, had been for a long time in a close relationship with at least one alien civilization, and that there was an ongoing mutual relationship, a treaty even, or multiple treaties between the US government and alien entities from other star systems. Specific, and that these aliens had a long history in the human race, and that the U.S. government, this is crucial, that the U.S. government had successfully reverse engineered some of this alien technology and had weaponized it, and so we're essentially, the implication there is that the U.S. government was tremendously powerful in a covert way, and were sort of uncontested. Could never be challenged really by any foreign power because they had alien technology, right? That's the implicit message to take away there. And these ideas and this very dense and specific narrative started to be sown into the UFO community through plants, through operatives, through assets in the 1980s, through the 1990s, and by the mid to late 1990s, it had really taken root and come to define the popular ufological narrative, and people by that point really were convinced within the UFO community that they had a good picture of what was going on, what had happened historically, but actually all of those ideas, or a lot of them, were planted by the US intelligence community. Now the question is why? Well, some people say, well, they were trying to acclimate us and trying to let us know, disclosure. It's all about moving us towards disclosure, and they're telling us the truth. That this information is planted and sown and spread is true, right? But it's done in a subtle way. Well, I would sort of question, those who believe that, because that's not the nature of the U.S. intelligence community. That's not the nature of covert power. They're not altruistic. They're not open, honest, and direct. They don't really have an interest in. I'm sorry. This is my. People would disagree with me here, but I don't believe that covert power structures really are driven by a desire for the betterment of humanity. I think, they're very self-serving, they're very insular, and a lot of the people, I take that back, not a lot of the people, but certainly some of the people within the key positions of power within any government power structure, frankly, are just not very nice people, and often psychopaths, which is why the world is the way it is, because the world's run by a bunch of psychopaths. And so I would question the validity and the intent of any kind of operation that seeks to sow particular information into a controllable subculture. How much of that is true? Why are they saying this? Why are they telling us this? And the fact is we don't know how much of it is true. What we can say is that probably very little of it is true. Some of it may be true, but the fact is that there's no way of verifying how much of it is true. But people choose to believe that it's true, and so a lot of those ideas have taken root in the UFO community, and they've come to define the narrative, as I say. And what it's done is it's simplified everything, and crucially, what it's done is it's taken attention away from the phenomenon itself and projected our attention onto human structures. It's projected our attention into these murky corridors of power that may lay, somewhere in Langley, Virginia, may lay somewhere deep below Area 51 in Nevada, and anywhere else in between. And it's externalizing the mystery, and it's sort of taking our attention away from the phenomenon itself, and our participation and involvement at individual and species level with this phenomenon. And it's sort of encouraging us to only ask questions of power structures, and that's where you've had the modern disclosure movement spring from. This idea that all answers to this to the UFO conundrum will be presented to us at some point in the near future by the powers that be. These same powers that be that for years the UFO community has deeply distrusted. It's totally schizophrenic. The UFO community seems to be split between, like an individual brain level split between deeply distrusting all aspects of officialdom and then wanting to place complete trust in officialdom when they go on TV and say, this is the phenomenon is real and here's your disclosure. My perspective is you simply cannot trust anything that any official power structure has to say on the UFO phenomenon, because all official involvement with this phenomenon dating back to 1947 has been characterized by deception. Totally. That's one thing we can say with certainty. It's all been characterized by deception. And so, and that's the nature as well, of course, of intelligence communities. That it's their job to deceive. They're not in the business of giving people the whole truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. They're in the business of manipulating people's perceptions, and so it's just a quagmire. People have placed all their expectations and hopes onto these official power structures for the ultimate truth about the phenomenon. And the irony is that these power structures themselves, CIA, Air Force, and various other agencies, they themselves don't understand the phenomenon. They like to give the impression that they do, but the fact is that they don't. And I think it's beyond. Full human understanding at this point. But we do ourselves a disservice, I think, by looking to these agencies and these power structures for answers, when actually we should be looking closer to home. We should be looking to ourselves. We should be looking to take this back to a grassroots level of research and understanding, and seeking to recognize our own part, the part that we play as individuals and as a species in this phenomenon. How does it relate to us? What does it say about us? There's only so much you can learn from a government document, and there's only so much trust you can place in a government document or in a statement from a government agency. And what I'm saying is, and what I've said for a long time, is that I don't believe there's anything left that the government, there's nothing left now that the government can give us that we can trust, that we can accept, that we can believe on this phenomenon. And in fact, we should actively reject any statement or any piece of information that is given to us, because I just don't see how anyone can trust it. That's my perspective, but people might disagree with me.
usually in hour number 2 here, we like to get to some questions from our audience, and we'll start off with BTO's question here. He is asking, do you feel that many UFO-related films are actually some sort of documentary based on reality?
Well, most Hollywood UFO products, as I've said, have drawn from factual research and events and recorded history. So even the most outlandish, seemingly ridiculous, sensationalized Hollywood movies, at some point in those narratives, they will have drawn from or been inspired by something that's happened in historically recorded fact, as far as UFOs are concerned. But what happens is, as they say, is that these ideas that were based in fact are sort of manipulated by the writers and then incorporated into in service of the narrative that they're putting together, and the presentation of these historical facts within the context of the science fiction genre, and specifically within this schlocky UFO genre, as it has often come across, it serves to fictionalize those ideas and blur the lines between UFO fact and fantasy, and it pushes the original fact, the original lived historical reality, into this realm that I refer to as hyper reality. This where we are unable to distinguish between fact and fantasy, and that's where the whole UFO subject seems to reside now. This hyper real realm where we're unable to distinguish between fact and fantasy, because so much of it has been fictionalized, yet actualized simultaneously through entertainment media, because that's the effect of entertainment media, and specifically Hollywood narratives, is to simultaneously fictionalize and actualize whatever it depicts, whether it be UFOs or any other historical event. It's this strange mystical effect that cinema has. And so documentary, are they documentaries? No. I mean, obviously there are many documentaries made on UFOs, but when you're looking at, a film like Independence Day, for example, is that a documentary? No, it's not a documentary, and it should never be interpreted as such. However, it does contain elements within its script that are directly influenced by recorded ufological history. It features references to Area 51 and the Roswell incident and other ideas like that. And of course, we know that those are real things. The Roswell incident, whatever it actually represented, was a real historical incident. Area 51 is a real base, and it's those kinds of films, Area 50, Independence Day, for example, that served to actually take those fringe ideas that weren't really known in the mainstream at that point. Not many people had heard of Area 51 in the early 1990s. Roswell, again, was by that point it was actually Independence Day that put Roswell on the map in a big way. It had been the subject of that 1994 film that I mentioned before, but Independence Day was the most successful film of 1996 and one of the most successful films of all time, and that was central to the narrative of that movie, Area 51. So that, by that point it was it was everywhere, and so no, it's not a documentary, but it draws from lived historical reality in some way, or from historical locations and events. But these, there's always a danger of interpreting these things literally, and they shouldn't be.
Let's get to Elizabeth's question here. She is asking, do you think an alphabet agency with a plant in a major newspaper could tweak a fix for a UFO researcher that was pushing the boundaries against the wishes of the military?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? Hello?
Yes. Do you think any alphabet agency could put a plant in a major newspaper, per se, to tweak any type of fix for a UFO researcher that was pushing the boundaries against the wishes of the military?
I'm not entirely sure I understand the question. Is it so? To address the first part, is it possible that an alphabet agency could plant within a
I guess to simplify it, do you think the media is infiltrated, to help the government, kind of push the boundaries of UFO research when it comes to Hollywood?
Oh, okay. So to further clarify that, so the question is I see, right? So yes. The answer is yes. I think that is possible, but how in my view, how it works is ideas are seeded, sown within, or encouraged or pushed within the UFO subculture, and they permeate the UFO subculture, and then Hollywood writers, people within the entertainment industry, engage with those ideas through the subculture, and then they incorporate some of those ideas into their popular dramatic narratives in Hollywood entertainment products, and then the result is that when those things are projected through the entertainment industry, those once fringe subcultural ideas become popularized and part of pop culture, and then they start to inform popular ideas about this subject, for better or for worse. So yeah, it's done from my perspective. It's done at a subcultural level. It begins at a subcultural level, and then those subcultural ideas, which some of which may have come from intelligence agencies, certainly have come from intelligence agencies, are then sort of engaged with by outsiders, from the entertainment industry, and they are incorporated into their narratives and then popularized and then become part of pop culture. So yeah, that process that I've just described is really the main subject of the book that I wrote, and the main subject of my research. This process by which fringe culture becomes pop culture, and all of the different sort of processes and agendas that may be at play.
Follow-up question by Liz. Do you then think that any of the media products out there presented to the public are actually some sort of psyops for cover-up?
Yeah, I'm sure that's the case. And again, the documentary in the book Mirage Men looks at that idea in quite some depth, and it's not a new idea. Yeah, I'm sure that is the case. The government itself has pushed the idea that the UFO phenomenon has been used historically as a cover for covert terrestrial projects, like the U2 and things like that. People were encouraged to kind of think that they'd seen a UFO instead of the spy plane. That's, the CIA pushed that idea. I think that they've massively blown that out of proportion, to be honest with you, because it implies that the US government were not interested in UFOs in the first place, which of course they were and are. And of course, UFOs are going to be far more highly classified than the U2. So, that in itself is sort of disinformation, that whole idea. But yeah, no, certainly it can be used as cover for other things, absolutely. And the thing is that there's so much belief, dogmatic, quasi-religious belief associated with UFOs within the community, that it's very easy. People are just people should be really cautious about being manipulated, because it doesn't take a lot to manipulate people, because this is a subject, one of the taglines for the X-Files was "I want to believe," and really, that's really the tagline for the whole UFO community. It should be "I want to believe." People, you asked earlier, like, why people are interested in, like, the idea of alien life and stuff like that, because, well, it's a religious thing ultimately. We all want to believe in something greater than us, in a higher power. And for some people that's God. For some people, that's spiritual beings. For some people, it's extraterrestrials. And in the modern age, it's increasingly becoming extraterrestrials. And there's a special appeal with extraterrestrials, I think, because they seem to be more tangible, than God, for example. And they seem to be something that ultimately, if we wait long enough and try hard enough, we can prove their existence on a mass scale, and that this knowledge of their existence will change the world in some way, perhaps usher in a new age of enlightenment with on planet Earth. And so, because if we sort of are looking at the idea of extraterrestrials as being physical beings in technical craft from other star systems, then ultimately, theoretically, that should be provable. And so there's a special attachment to that idea, and of course it's a very valid idea and almost certainly true. But I think when you look at the UFO reports since going back not only decades but also centuries and millennia, if you're looking at it pre-modern UFO era, then the phenomenon seems to be representative of something more complex, far more complex than just extraterrestrial visitation. It's far, far weirder than that. And that's not to rule out an extraterrestrial component. I think there probably is some extraterrestrial component to it, but it seems to transcend that, in my opinion. It goes far beyond that. It's far weirder, far weirder. But a lot of the weirder aspects, these high strangeness aspects of the phenomenon, seem to get filtered out in modern reports and by modern researchers as well, because they don't conform to the extraterrestrial conspiratorial narrative that's been carved over the past sort of 20 or 30 years. And so, if people are reporting supernatural aspects to the UFO encounters, and many people do, great many people report supernatural aspects to their encounters, paranormal aspects, even cryptozoological aspects to their encounters, then a lot of the time those aspects of the reports will be filtered out, either by the witness, the experiencer, or by the researcher who's documenting the case, because they fear that it discredits the alien element. But actually, we need to look at these sightings, these experiences more holistically, and recognise all of the different aspects that make them what they are. And when you do so, it seems that we are dealing with something, as I say, far more complex, multifaceted than just alien visitation. And that's problematic, because if it's more than that, if it's weirder than that, if it's more directly connected to us as a species, like, if it's something that's more directly related to us and maybe even from us, that's far harder to prove within our lifetime. That's something that's far harder to put your finger on and present, at a press conference and say, well, we know that UFOs are, aliens from Zeta Reticuli, as opposed to UFOs are a collective manifestation of the global consciousness and Gaia, and are representative of all sorts of different anomalous phenomena that have been interacting with us for millennia, and also there may be aliens involved. It's far harder to sort of say that. And so I just think that other ideas should be considered. But of course, we need to recognise that because Hollywood never considers any other ideas, it's no surprise that people continue to interpret the phenomenon so simplistically, because Hollywood has such a huge influence on how we receive it.
Mm-hmm. Let's get to Adam's question then. So he is asking, to confirm with you, do you then believe that Hollywood is somewhat working with world governments hand in hand to help with the cover-up? Okay, not world governments. Hollywood works with Washington. Hollywood works with the Department of Defense and CIA and various other branches of the US military and intelligence communities very actively and openly today, but also covertly. But officially they work openly with them, but there's also covert practice there as well. Yes, that's the case, and not just on UFO movies, but like mainly on other types of movies, all types of movies, all genres, in TV and film and all sorts of stuff. Advertising. Yes, that's the case. Is it towards a cover-up? No, there is, in my opinion, no cover-up anymore. The term cover-up is not applicable to what's happening. I'm not sure there's ever really been a cover-up, and beyond those first few months and years of the phenomenon in its modern form in 1947, cover-up implies a blanket, this blanket program to make people believe that there's nothing happening, and to conceal. And it's not so much about that. It's about managing perceptions of something, and you do that by encouraging belief in it. You actually encourage certain beliefs about the subject. So it's almost opposite of cover up in a way, but it's more sophisticated than that, and that's how it works. So but if the question is Hollywood working with Washington to manipulate perceptions of the UFO phenomenon, then I would say yes, but not in an organized way, not in a way that a lot of people within the UFO community would like to believe. It's not some giant program where it's very, very organized and every studio and every executive is involved in this massive program to manipulate perceptions. That's just not how it works. It's never how it's worked. But yes, certainly there is the infrastructure there between Hollywood and Washington to manipulate how we perceive a great many issues in this world, including UFOs. VTO has a question. He is asking, do you feel that Hollywood UFO films are trying to desensitize or dismiss the UFO phenomena?
Desensitize desensitize us to it. No, I mean, I don't think that it is about desensitizing us to it, because I don't think we've needed to be. Again, that implies the typical classic disclosure scenario that there's going to be a mothership over New York, and that the government is trying to desensitize us to that through. No, that's never really held much water for me. What was the other part of the question? That desensitize us or to
dismiss the UFO subject?
Again, to refer back to my answers earlier, yes, initially they were trying to dismiss it, and they were trying to actively discourage belief in the phenomenon and acceptance of it. But that changed very rapidly when they recognised that you weren't going to be successful in that agenda, and then they started to encourage belief in certain aspects of it for their own ends. But again, so is it to desensitize? I suppose it's not to desensitize us to it, but it's to sort of portray it in a certain way that best suits them. Should things that I always think that maybe there will be one day a scenario where things get out of hand and these intelligences, whatever they might be, manifest on a global scale. Say some kind of global contact scenario or whatever. Maybe that will happen. Maybe it will happen. And if that ever does happen, it would be completely beyond the control of any world power, and that's always been the case. And so if that happens, then of course there'll be all sorts of questions put to our leaders. When did you know? How much did you know? You told us that there was nothing to this. The public would be outraged. You told us that Roswell wasn't real. You told us that none of this was real, that it was all nonsense. And yet here we see proof of it. You've lied to us, and people will be pointing their fingers and want to lynch the people who are in government, right? Because they've kept this massive secret from us and made us think we were stupid. And I think in that scenario, the powers that be want to be in the position where they can say, okay, so we kept it secret because it was in the best interests of the people. It was a national security issue. We were doing this for your own good, but also, they want to portray themselves as having sort of often no prior knowledge of it. So one of the key themes that emerges in Hollywood narratives, where those films have been supported by the Department of Defense in an official capacity, what happens in those films to do with UFOs is often that the government or the Air Force, whoever's depicted on screen within those films, they are very explicitly depicted as having no prior knowledge or involvement in a UFO cover-up. So in Transformers, for example, there's a really laboured scene which is clearly written by some Department of Defense staffers, where you have where they have the Secretary of Defense himself, played by John Boyd, first learning of the fact that there's been a secret, covert operation to keep aliens secret for decades, since the 1930s. And there's this secret government agency, quasi-government agency, crucially, called Sector 7 in Transformers. And as I say, they're quasi-governmental because they're not officially sanctioned, right? And the Secretary of Defense himself, as the official representative of the official Department of Defense, he is oblivious to the existence of Sector 7 and of aliens. There's a sequence in Transformers, which is fully supported by the Department of Defense, by the way, where the Secretary of Defense is taken down into the basement of, Sector 7 and shown some frozen alien, right? And he's outraged by this. He's absolutely outraged. Oh my God, how can you, how could this have been kept secret from me? Do you not think you should have told me there's a frozen alien in the basement, etc.? And what that's doing is it's sort of absolving the official power structures in an official capacity of historical involvement or knowledge of UFOs and a UFO cover-up. And that's common. That's not just in Transformers. Those kind of sequences appear in most of the films that are supported by the Department of Defense where UFOs are involved. They go out of their way to sort of have no prior knowledge of involvement in the phenomenon. Like in Battleship, for example, 2012 film Battleship, directed by Peter Berg, which is again fully supported by the Department of Defense. It's just a massive advert for the Navy, essentially. Terrible film, and basically written by DoD staffers. And there's again the the military on screen have absolutely no prior knowledge of aliens. You know, they've got nothing to fall back on, and so when the aliens show up in that film, they're as surprised as the person on the street. You know, and of course that's nonsense. We know that's absolute nonsense. We know for a fact that for decades every branch of the US government has had a deep interest or a significant interest in UFOs, whatever they might represent. Whereas in these films, they sort of there's no sort of wiping the historical record clean, starting from scratch, and so these narratives seem to be interested in putting that picture across, that there is no cover up, there has been no deception, and that should aliens ever present themselves to us in a hostile scenario, the US government is as clueless as the next person, but super ready and willing to fight, you know, if need be. So these are ideas that I explore in the book in quite some detail, and I look at all of the examples of films and TV shows where this is the case.
I'm just wondering if they're portraying the aliens as the bad guys now, because really there is no more Cold War, even though there is tensions with Russia, and pretty much every terrorism angle has been taken care of. So, I mean, it just seems so logical to make, you know, the enemy an alien species now.
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, that's absolutely the case. And aliens have. Going back to the 1950s, of course, aliens were used as allegories for communists anyway, and things like that, infiltrating our society silently and things like that. But yeah, post Cold War, so films about terrorism don't do very well at the box office. They just don't do very well at the box office anymore, and people don't really want to go and pay a lot of money to go and see films about terrorism. It's just too close to home. But as you say, films need antagonists. That, you know, they need scary antagonists, and what better than aliens? And so obviously people are going to continue to make films about aliens. And as I say, it's just easier to write that than it is to write something like Arrival, for example, you know, or something like Contact, where you've got a character-based, plot-driven, philosophical story about the nature of life. You know, it's just much easier to write something like War of the Worlds, you know, all those kinds of things, like Independence Day or whatever. Not that there's not skill involved in writing those things, but it's just easier to make them conform to a certain template. And it's you know, Hollywood's a business at the end of the day, and executives don't really like taking risks. So if it's proven at the box office, then that you repeat the formula. Often the result isn't very good, or it's uninspired, but that's the way it is, unfortunately.
Joe is asking, were cartoons early on any early attempt at disclosure? Because, I mean, there was always the anti-character. Bugs Bunny had Marvin the Martian, for instance.
Again, I can only refer back to you know, so CIA, for example, yeah, they were interested in cartoons as well. They infiltrated every aspect and every genre, going back to the 1950s, and DOD and stuff were also involved in cartoons, absolutely. What the agenda was there, we can only speculate. Was Marvin the Martian part of a CIA agenda? I honestly don't know. Probably not, but I mean, again, as for the disclosure aspect of that question, I don't know that there was ever really an agenda to disclose anything. You know, my question is always why would they why would they disclose this? One, it assumes that they have enough information to disclose, and that the information that they have is comprehensible to and digestible by the mass populace. And second, it assumes that you know, just why would they, you know, if that's privileged information that's of national security interest, why would they ever disclose that? Because they're not altruistic. They're not in service of humanity. I'm sorry. I mean, this is reflective, obviously, of my views of covert power structures. It's not to say that there aren't good. Obviously, there are many good people within the intelligence communities. Many good people within the intelligence communities. But the people who run those agencies and the people who run the government, you know, more broadly, and those power structures often are not very good people, and that's why they get into those positions in the first place, because they kind of so morally compromisable, and and just look at the world. I mean, it's completely screwed and always has been, and I just think that why on earth would they ever disclose this stuff? Like, it seems like a really nice thing to do, and that's just not what they do. They don't do nice things. At least not when it comes to stuff like that, to stuff like that would have huge national security implications. Surely they would be concerned about disclosing that information, because what a foreign enemy power is going to do with that? How could they exploit that if that information is out in the public? If they've weaponized any of this technology, which perhaps they may have, again, why disclose that? What's the benefit? They have everything to lose and absolutely nothing to gain. Secrets only have power when they remain. Secrets are only valuable when they remain secret. But again, it assumes that they have something that's actually disclosable. And my opinion is that although they may have studied the phenomenon for many decades very closely and invested a lot of money in it, and although they may have more answers than the average person on the street, I think that they would still be very, very far from a full understanding of what they're dealing with, because, as I say, it seems to be incredibly complex, multifaceted, more to do with the nature of what we are at core than anything else.
Robbie, we are down to the last final seconds with you. Please tell everybody where they can buy Silverscreen Saucers.
Silverscreen Saucers is available on Amazon and any sort of good online bookstore, and I'd encourage you to visit my website, which is robbiegraham.uk. You can see my Silverscreen Saucers book and my new book, UFOs Reframing the Debate, and you can also read a lot of my articles about UFOs in Hollywood on there as well, and on Mysterious Universe.
Robbie, Merry Christmas to you, Happy Holidays, and congrats on your engagement. Thank you so much for being on Spaced Out Radio tonight. We really appreciate it. Coming up in hour number 3, Rich Giordano from the Paranormal Code and the Fringe.fm is going to join us right after this.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
There's stories, then there's the truth. Do any of us really trust the news anymore? This is Jamie Sexton, owner of Rebel Planet News. The third Thursday of every month, I appear on SpacedOutRadio.com to bring you the truth you deserve, without mainstream media lies or alternative media fear-mongering. We'll get to the heart of the story and deliver the truth you are seeking. So come join us here for the Rebel Planet at SpacedOutRadio.com.
We are lighting the void on Saturday nights on Spaced Out Radio. Hey, this is Joe Roop, and I'm hanging out in SOR headquarters every Saturday night, bringing you the latest news when it comes to the weird and strange. Bigfoot, occult, UFOs, ghosts, and everything in between, I got you covered. You can tune in to SpacedOutRadio.com starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. Come travel into the void with us on Spaced Out Saturdays.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on SpacedOutRadio.com.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4 Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories. From alien encounters to the latest conspiracies, you won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
There's a lot of strange going on in this world, and we can help you find out what's going on with you. Paranormal, cryptids, UFOs in the sky, aliens in your bedroom tickling your toes. We have the investigators you need to find out the answers you deserve. All you have to do is head to spacedoutradio.com. Your information is 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report. It's free, and we're here to help.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories.
It's Cosmic Sundays with me, Elizabeth Anglin, in Cosmic Passport. Let me take you down a 3-hour spiritual journey where we will get into everything from ET contact to Psychic Sundays. It's a journey of listening and learning together with some of the best professionals in their fields. You can tune in to Cosmic Passport at spacedoutradio.com every Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, futurist Alfred Lambermont Weber is going to join us. We're going to get into everything from exopolitics to time travel and so much more. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network 101.9 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. Good to have you with us. We're also live on the Fringe.fm, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Bergschrund. Bergschrund is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you could do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect live with me during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Facebook, you can also join our live chat in the SOR Space Travelers group. We are on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR, and our YouTube channel is youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Nice and simple. It's our new channel, so you can unsubscribe from the old one, subscribe up to the new one, because we're moving all of our archives over. We would appreciate that. And you can listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live, tune us in on TuneIn, download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is just being rebuilt. It's spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including, you'll have to find out when the new website is up and running in the next day or two. I do want to remind you that we are taking and asking for donations on GoFundMe as we look to improve our technology and our broadcast quality. You could go to GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. And we want to thank Brian, Milo, Aussie Rob, Canadian Joe, and Robin for being our latest contributors. We're trying to reach a goal because we have the technology that we want to get to in order to take this show and make it terrestrial. And we would appreciate your help. Joining us here in hour number 3 from the Fringe.fm and the Paranormal Code is Rich Giordano. You may have heard him on this show before because he is a very, very solid voice when it comes to the field of ufology. And after having Robbie Graham on the first 2 hours talking about Hollywood and UFOs and the subject, I figured, you know what? This would be a great carryover because we could continue on with the UFO chat. So, Rich, welcome back to Spaced Out Radio. How you doing, my friend?
Oh, thank you very much. Glad to be back. Doing good. Doing great, actually. Thanks for asking. And, man, I was good first 2 hours. That guy had some tough questions to answer, but what a great first 2 hours. Amazing stuff he knows. Hello?
Weirdest thing here. I think my headphones just died on me, Rich. I know you were talking. I know the audience could hear you, but I could not. So I'm just going to quickly change headphones here. So please bear with me.
Oh, I could reverse that.
I want to be able to hear what you're saying too.
Oh, yeah, so what I said. I was rewinding. That's the old joke. Is this thing on? I know everybody's listening. And they're like, oh, my God, the guy's talking to himself.
There we go. I got you. I got you. I had some headphone issues here, my friend. So all of a sudden, my good headphones just seem to die on me. It's always something. You know, it's always something. You know, you just want things to go smoothly. And I could tell that you were talking because I was like watching your levels go back and forth. And I'm like, where's Rich? Where is he? Why is he not there? How you been doing?
I'm doing great, man. I moved into my new home in Sedona, Arizona, where the vortices run wild. I'm excited. It's cold, but I'm getting to dig it. Going to get some snow for the first time in 35 years in my life. Not up north yet where you are, but I'm moving. I'm getting up there.
I thought you were planning on moving more north.
I am. I have to stay close to Mom and Pops for a few more years, and then I figured I'll go up north. I don't know. I was thinking of, Portland, Seattle, Washington, I don't know. I like Canada. As a matter of fact, I love Canada. I've been there several times and been having my eye on that place up there, Dave. I don't know. You guys are all nice. It's such a nice place.
Plenty of room, my friend. Plenty of room around here. I can tell you that. I can tell you that. And lots of UFO sightings as well. So we got the technical snafu kind of figured out, which is always, always good. And we now know that you want to move up to Canada eventually, so you better start the process now, because it's going to take absolutely forever for you to get up here. But that's okay. That's all right. It's good to have you back with us. What's new in your UFO research, bud?
You know, I have been diving into the conspiracy world where sun simulators and the flat earth are one and the same, a bunch of BS. I just don't believe that people are still talking about Nibiru. So I've been diving into all these conspiracies lately. Not a lot of, ufology stuff going on lately, but, man, I like me a good conspiracy. I go in waves. I'm a very cyclical person. I'll spend a month on, conspiracies, then I'll spend a month talking to people, and then I'll spend a month doing silly stuff, just whatever to make people laugh. So right now I'm into the conspiracy thing. I've had some strange experiences, though, since I moved up to this new house. So I don't know what I'm in for. It's a brand new place.
Oh, tell us about those. You got to fill us in.
Oh, I didn't really want to, but I think I saw my dog's bone. I put his treats in a little container, like a plastic thing, and I know it moved. So I'm gonna check. I think I had my account. I was playing with my phone, and I was looking at the TV through the phone. That's how we watch TV now. But I was amazed on how the Samsung phone is much better than the iPhone I had, and I was just looking at it, and I thought I could have sworn that dog's thing moved. And I haven't checked the file yet, but I'm about to. And it happened just before coming on here. And it's weird. You said some strange things. Like, I've been talking about being targeted. These targeted individuals, where I would get ready to do my Thursday show, and I'd get sick an hour before the show. And it didn't happen tonight before your show. It doesn't happen on Sundays, but only Thursdays. And then I've had some strange markings appear on my body, which I'll send you the pics personally. I don't know if I want them to go public for everybody to see, but I want you to take a look at them. I went to the doctor. I woke up with 2nd-degree burns on my shoulder, just sleeping. So, yeah, some things are happening up here in Sedona since I moved. Very, very strange.
That is very strange. I haven't had any good weirdness lately. I'm kind of jealous. It's been a few weeks since I got taken last, and, it's something where I just really, really, yearn for that. Maybe they're leaving me alone, knowing that I need to concentrate on this show a little bit more right now. Maybe they're actually having some empathy for me as we try and build this. I don't know.
Well, for the last year or so, I've been playing with the Ouija board, trying to contact the devil. So people are saying that I've spoken to, they're like, well, maybe it followed you to a place where nobody's around you to bother you. Because where I was living before, I had neighbors really close, but now I don't. I don't know if that's true or whatever, but I don't have any dreams. I'm not remembering being abducted but I did see that thing move tonight. I know I did. I know I saw it. So hopefully I got that on the video.
Where's the proof? Where is the proof? The skeptics are going to say, where is the proof? Show us the proof.
I've got the pictures. I sent it to Joe on what happened to my shoulder. So I wanted to get his opinion on that. So, yeah, I've got proof. Oh, but I hope I got that on video, Dave.
I know. It's so much good. See, you know what? I come from the angle that drives a lot of people nuts, Rich. And I know it does you as well. And I come from the angle that all of my experiences, I really do not care if I have evidence or quote-unquote proof.
Right.
Because I have them for me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't need that photograph. I don't need that videotape or that EVP or whatever it is. Like, for me, I just look at it at such a different angle with, my own experiences that they were somehow for me. And yes, I come on here and I say, hey, everyone, I know you don't know me, but I need you to believe me on this, which really isn't the case because everybody has their own choice. But there's a lot of people now, Rich, where they are going for the experience themselves rather than bringing the tape recorder or the digital camera or whatever. They just want to experience and feel what it's like and take it all in. Do you think the more spiritual people are getting, or the more that people start to look into this field, the less that they are going to want to record it and just sit back and experience it like a good football game or rock concert?
I think so. I think it's like anything else. That's how I went through it. It's like a process, I think. When I was catching the UFOs way back when, for the first 3 years I was doing this, I was like, I don't care if I have my camera with me. If I see it, I see it. It's weird. Maybe you get burnout, or you already know you got the evidence. You know it's true, but you want to go in there raw. So if anything does happen, it is for you, but you don't need to have validation from people. After you've been doing this a long time, like me, you, and a lot of other people, we don't need to be pat on the back for a job well done of catching it on tape. We don't care. And I think at some point you get to that level where you don't care. You don't need it. You know it's real. You're just going to enjoy it as is. And I think, and it's funny, when you watch these shows, and even people who aren't on TV, they go into the houses where there's spirits, and they talk about what they're going to do. We're going to put a camera here. We're going to put this camera there. Well, don't you think the spirits are listening to where you're setting up everything not to be seen? They know what your plan is. I say plan it before, and then, then go in and set everything up as a surprise. I don't know. But I think without the camera, you may get a better experience. That's my point, Dave. I'm trying to say, go in without the camera. You may experience 10 times more stuff.
What do you need to experience? You've been in this field a decade. What do you need to experience for yourself? I'm not saying for evidence or for your show or to put it on camera. What do you need? What do you want to experience?
And I don't want it in dream form because that's all I know. But I want to, for me, it would be communicating with an alien being, any type of alien, as long as they're nice. But that would be the ultimate for me. And actually, the real ultimate thing would be to be taken, not abducted, but taken to them and just go, hunting for planets, whatever they do, just be with them, learn about them, learn their technology. If I could even understand it, I'm sure if they're traveling over here, and it doesn't mean they're extremely smart just because they travel over here and know how to bend time and space. They could be idiots. They could have the worst personalities. They could all be bullies, but I hope they could learn our language. I hope they're that far advanced that they would understand us and we could understand them. So I'm going to imagine it that way because that's the way I want it to happen. So if that happens, I would like to be visited. I don't have to have my camera. I just would love to have a conversation with a being from another planet. That would be the ultimate.
There's two experiences that I want to have again. I want to see another Sasquatch. I really want to see another Sasquatch. Yeah. It was so quick the first time that I hope, and I'm trying to, like next year when it starts to warm up, my buddy Mark and I, we're going to be spending a lot of time in the woods around here because our Sasquatch area is only about 20 minutes away from where we are. But I really, really want to try and see a Sasquatch again. But more so than that, because of everything that has kind of happened with, my own ET experiences or everything, I want that close encounters of the third kind scenario where a ship is like parked in my backyard or in the green belt behind my yard, and I just walk up to it. Everything consciously. Mm-hmm. Everything has to be conscious. And I walk up and just climb aboard. That's exactly. That's what I want. And I don't know if I'll get that opportunity. I put it out to the universe, or whomever you're supposed to put it out to. They know that I want it to happen, but I definitely want to go for a ride. I have to see this. This is something that is, like, for me, that is, goal number one in this entire field, is to go on that trip. I want to experience it. I want to feel it. And like I said, I don't know if it'll ever happen, but that's where I want to go. That's what I want to do.
God, those are two great experiences, and I would love to see Bigfoot once, just so I would know that it's out there. Because I'm always saying what you were saying earlier. Where's the evidence? I want to believe Bigfoot so bad that I almost believe what I'm seeing on video some of the times. But I know you saw it, so I believe you. So I know it's real from all the stories we've heard, but man alive, that would be great. I just can't imagine it. I don't know. I don't know if there's Bigfoot in Sedona. I think there is actually a Bigfoot in Arizona. It's a lot of land up here.
Well, hopefully you do. Just be careful of your weird experiences. So the first couple of hours tonight, we were talking with author Robbie Graham and about his book, Silverscreen Saucers. And we talked about Hollywood and their take on the field of ufology. Do you think, when you look at the scenario between Hollywood and UFOs, that there just seems to be a lot of quirky information that seems very, very true and just a little too real to be some writer's imagination?
Well, we said that about Star Trek. They talk into these magical boxes they flip open. Then we've already bypassed the flip phone. So now we hold computers in our hands. And, like when Minority Report came out, they had, when he wore the gloves and he waved his hand in the air and the screen moved, and you were like, wow, that's amazing. The first time we ever saw that. And now they have where they're making houses where anywhere you walk, you can touch this, touch that, talk to this. So everything's becoming the Jetsons. Other than the flying cars, we can pay with our phones. We can pay for stuff with our phone, man. How cool is that? You just wave your phone over this magical device. Boom, you bought a TV. Boom, you bought groceries. It's very strange, but it's all happening so fast. So what I think might happen, AI is going to get real advanced in the next 20 years. And it may be a problem for humanity. We're going to lose so many more jobs. This technology is getting too advanced too quick. I know that's weird, but it's amazing that we can, hold a computer in our hand now, watch TV, do whatever. But I do think there is some sort of, what do they say? Art becomes reality, reality becomes art, or whatever or life imitates art, that kind of stuff. I think you do. I think the movies do. I think they may know things we don't know. I think they get all their stuff from researching the same stuff we do, but then they just make a movie out of it, and they have great imaginations. I don't think the government gets involved. I think that would already have been leaked out in a serious way, unless Hollywood is filled with a bunch of wimps. That's a joke. But I don't know. I don't know. I think there is some sort of relationship there. These guys do the research. Maybe they're given something from a guy who used to work in the military. He says, if you put this in there, it would make it more realistic. They did that with Close Encounters with J. Allen Hynek. He was, one of the guys who told them what the Greys looked like, supposedly, I think, something like that. But he was one of their go-to guys in Close Encounters. So the information's being leaked somehow, Dave. So yeah, I think it is being filtered through.
Well, the example that I brought up is, for some reason, I don't know why that scene from the original Men in Black always kind of stuck with me, where, Tommy Lee Jones goes and picks up like the Star magazine and National Enquirer saying, you got to read up on this stuff. This is where they tell us where the aliens are, and so on and so forth. And I don't know why that always stuck with me. But then talking to Robbie earlier on tonight, after hearing in the past week, let's see, Michael Schratt talked about it, and there was somebody else, Grant Cameron, I believe, talked about it as well a couple weeks ago, where this is true. The United States government does release things through these smut magazines just to see what the public reaction would be. And, to hear Robbie discuss it tonight, that, yeah, of course they are. How do you think the information is leaking? It just kind of weirded me out a little bit about how synonymous a lot of this stuff is, and we have, as a generalized public, have no clue.
None at all. None. We'll never know. That's the beauty of it all, isn't it? It's a shame. But do we know, Dave? Maybe we do know. We know deep down in our soul, if that's what you want to call it, we know they're out there. I know we don't have the proof we want. We want to go on that ship and be with them and do all that, but I don't know. It's a fine line we're talking about. Then that means, then there's a lot of things out there that are real that we don't know that's real yet. Are the Transformers possibly real? I mean, we know those have been around since, the 70s, 80s? But now they're in movies? No. So I don't think that one would apply. So I'm trying to think of other ways they could have infiltrated our mind with thinking that they have alien technology and they're leaking it out, or some type of alien existence and putting it into movies.
No, I realize that. It just is weird for me, and, he brings up the idea of the original Transformers, and I got to tell you, probably in the last 2 months, I've watched that movie about 27, 28 times because my little guy loves Transformers. I mean, he literally sleeps with his Optimus Prime Halloween costume on because he just loves Optimus Prime every day. I mean, I can go upstairs at any time during the day and he's doing something with Transformers. Right? And, but going back to that movie, when you start to look at it, you start to really see that there is some realism to this, like Sector 7, a Black Ops government agency above anything that a lot of people in government know. And it just kind of makes you wonder. It makes you bring out that imagination and say, okay, what is really real and what is really fallacy anymore? And do we even know, Rich?
No, we don't. We don't. Do we? Are you asking, or is that rhetorical?
No, it's both, actually.
I didn't know how to take it. I was confused. I'll take it as a question to me. Yeah, I don't think we'll know the difference. And that's what interests me about these conspiracies that we always talk about. That we always hear, I mean. Are they leaking that we have bases on the moon? By putting that documentary out there on regular television, did we go to the moon? It was a 2-hour show. I don't know if it was Fox, but it was on regular TV. Was it cable? Am I wrong on that? Talking to myself, he doesn't know. Anyway, to put that out there, that's pretty amazing to me, even if it's on just cable. And that tells me, well, maybe there is something to what they're showing us. When I see shows like that, it makes you think. Are they telling us the truth? Are there really bases on the moon? Are they? Have they been watching us the whole time? Do we really live in a simulator? I mean, it's just crazy. It can go on and on. Pick your poison.
And that's exactly it. Pick your poison. And yet, the public wants proof. Before they could believe, they want proof of existence. They want proof of alien contact. They want proof of Bigfoot with a body. They want proof. And you know what? I don't blame them for that. I'm not saying that to be sarcastic to many in this audience or many skeptics out there, because, what they are asking for is legitimate. Give us what we need to know. Give us what we deserve to know. Just say yes or no. It's that simple. You know, we're all big kids here. There's no need to hide this crap anymore. You know what I'm saying? And when you now take in movies and then you listen to a guy like Robbie Graham, who wrote Silverscreen Saucers, I think you have to really take it and say, well, what are we being told that's true and what are we being told that's not? Because it seems to be a very blurry image these days with anything to deal with the supernatural or paranormal.
But how do you find those nuggets in the movie and pick them out and say, yeah, that's going to be us in 40 years? I think the technology's moved so far advanced, we won't be able to tell the difference. And they're making Princess Leia look like she's 20 years old again in Star Wars. It's amazing the technology that they can replicate human skin. Not perfectly yet, but in 20 years, 30, let's say 50. Look where we've come 50 years ago. Yeah, when Star Trek came out, Dave, like I said, they even had the doors that open and closed. Oh, wow, look at that. They just walk up to the door and it opens. How cool. Well, we got those everywhere. They're in every mall. Yeah, I think my neighbor might have one. So it is strange. It's just now they have so much stuff out there. How do you weed it out and figure it out? I think we're reaching an apex level where technology, cinematography, the ideas, everything's been out there. Now it's being duplicated and triplicated. We've seen it all. We've heard it all. So now what's next? I mean, it's hard to fool people nowadays. I'm trying to think of something now. I mean, I know The Matrix, that wowed me back then and got me thinking, whoa, maybe we don't live on a world. Maybe it is a computer simulation for an alien being. And what is our soul is the actual alien being taking our body when we're just a little egg. I don't know. I'm just reaching here for Dave.
Buddy, would you believe that I just saw The Matrix for the first time about 6 weeks ago?
What? I don't even know you anymore.
I don't watch movies. I do not
Really?
watch. I don't watch movies. You know, I'll tell you why. My parents, God bless them, because I love them both, and you know, they've been married 47 years, 48 years, whatever it is. You know, a hell of a long time. Let's just be blunt. 47 years, and they literally, like, my two older sisters are 10 and 7 years older than me, and my sisters went bloody haywire. So when it came to the only boy in the family and the last and final child, I literally was ruled with an iron fist. So while all my friends were going to high school parties, my parents wouldn't let me out of the house. Seriously. You know, I'm not even joking about that. I tell you, when I hit the drinking age of 19 around here, I was literally at the bar every night, just trying to catch up, right? Because literally, I didn't go to any high school parties, and it wasn't that I was a nerd or anything like that. I was popular, but my parents just didn't want me doing that kind of stuff. So the point that I'm getting at here is every single weekend, Friday and Saturday, it was movie night. And I probably watched every video in our local video store 2-3 times. You know, I couldn't wait for the beginning of the month with the new releases, you know, because the regular rentals were $3 and the new releases were $5.
Right.
You know, and I literally would ride my bike down to the video store, but I did this for like 5 years. From the time I was like 12, 13 years old up until, you know, I graduated, because I was so paranoid of my parents and scared of my parents that I didn't want to offend them or anything along those lines. So literally, I watched movies every single weekend, and the minute I got to 19 and into the bar scene up here in Canada, to hell with the movies. To hell with them. I hate them. I have no time for them. To me, it's just an absolute waste of time. So, no. I mean, it takes a lot for me to sit down and watch a movie.
Well, with that said, how did you like The Matrix?
I thought it was heavy. I thought it played with the mind a little bit. I did like it. as stupid as it sounds, I finally figured out what the red pill and blue pill mean, and I've seen that meme up there for years on Facebook. What the Sam hell does this mean? I don't get it. What am I missing? Oh, it's a Matrix thing. No, I haven't seen the movie, but now that I have, now I get it. Which pill would you pop?
I forget which one took you where. Where'd the red one take you?
I think the red one kept you in your day-to-day life.
No, I would have liked to have gotten out of the Matrix. I think that was the blue pill, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I would have liked to have been jacked out. See, I was being very respectful right there, how I worded that.
That's hard for you. It's hard for you.
I know. It is very, very tough. But I'm glad. I'm glad I did. So, yeah, I would like to be in a real world, not the Matrix.
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
But the way I don't know. It's like, yeah, I don't know. It depends on what you want. If you're the one. But, with that said, even, I know I've been using that a lot lately. But with that said, with that, could psychic abilities be what the Matrix really is? Tapping into a vibration, the computer systems, the energy waves, and picking up the signals from beyond or the living. That always interested me. Maybe that's how they tap in, because maybe the whole universe is one big computer matrix simulation. But if you look at that, they've done that in movies a few times already. Mm-hmm. They're always talking about alternate universes. So that's another big one, alternate universes. So I believe that could be another little nugget they're throwing out there.
Could be. Hey, I wanted to get your opinion. Last night we had John Edmonds on.
Right.
And I know that you are grinding your teeth about this guy, trying to, you tried to get an investigation going there with a film crew and everything, and, he kind of denied you guys coming on in there. What do you think of the John Edmonds Stardust Ranch story?
Well, he didn't deny us to come in there. He wanted money if there was a TV show, and he wanted a cut. And the producer said, well, we don't know. This is a pilot, that I doubt we can give you anything. So he said, well, I can't without a promise of, something. So that squashed that deal. So we're going to do research around the area here around the ranch, because the whole place is just lit up with activity. Now, I don't know about his experiences. That's why we wanted to go there, to validate some of that. I'm sure if I went there with me without the camera crew, because I didn't go there, these guys did. If I went there, maybe reached out to him as a totally different entity altogether and not be with a film crew, definitely I think he might let me in. But they're going to sell that place. I don't know if he's going to get the $5 million he's asking, but he's asking a lot, because he thinks that place is filled up with secrets of aliens visiting Earth in and out. There's a portal. I don't know how many he said he killed, a lot with his machete.
19.
But 19, yeah. Yeah, so, it's hard, Dave, because I used to be one of those people. In the last 10 years, I've grown a lot. Like, I used to be one of these people that said, it's just his story. And then I started having weird stuff that I have to explain and have people believe me. So I understand that part of it a lot better than I used to. So maybe it is happening to him. We don't know, because the evidence just somehow disappears, which is very convenient. So I am torn. I want to believe so badly that he's having his experiences, and then I also deep down feel that, well, most of it's got to be some BS. Maybe there is activity there. I know one of these TV shows went there, one of these ghost shows went there and captured some stuff, but you never know what's made up for TV. So I don't know, Dave. I don't know. I'm 60. I'm going to say 60-40 on this one. That I don't believe. I do believe.
I'm a little bit higher than that. And the reason why is my friends, before I even came up with the concept of Spaced Out Radio, friends of mine owned a 10-acre farm.
Oops, sorry.
What's your chihuahua doing?
He's out of water, and I'm in the other room. If I move, the headset will squelch, and I can't give him water.
Oh, how do you do that to your dog? How do you do that to him?
He just drank a whole bowl. I don't know what's wrong with him.
Your dog is only like 1.5 pounds. How much water can he take?
1.5 pounds.
Apparently. Anyhow, like before I started this show, the majority of my experiences where I saw the Bigfoot, where I saw a lot of shadows and weird things, where I had the UFO landing, where I saw the alien, and where I heard the Sasquatch roar, it all happened on my friend's property. But they had like 9.6 acres. And I'll tell you, being on a property like that where you have continuous weird stuff happening, like it was every day there was something happening there. And it was like going to Paranormal Disneyland, where literally when we got off work, or when I got off work, we'd go over there to hang out just for the night, just to see what was going to happen. And you never knew what was going to happen around there. And so that's the biggest reason why I do believe John, in a lot of ways, with the experiences that he is having, because in a pseudo sort of way, I've experienced the exact same thing. So I don't have this ability to sit here and say, oh, he's full of it, he's making it up, all he wants is attention. I don't have that ability to do that, mainly because I've experienced it myself. And that's the difficulty I'm having with trying to be skeptical about him saying that he's using a samurai sword to slice aliens, and that you have to take off the head so the body doesn't disappear.
But Dave, that's what I was saying earlier. You and I know. People like us who've been around for a while, have experiences. We know. We don't need to have the proof. But it's the other 99% of the public that wants that proof. So that's where the burden lies on. Well, it really shouldn't be on anybody, really. But the public makes it that way. That you need to have this proof or we're not going to believe anything you say. And here it is. This poor guy could be fighting off aliens. Maybe it's happening to other people and they're not talking about it. I mean, he's just talking about it. Right? Because experiences happen all over the place. Mm-hmm. So it's just, it's just on how the public perceives it and how they reply to it. And right now, he's not getting a warm reception.
Mm-hmm. No, and you know what? I wouldn't expect him to. I wouldn't expect anybody to. And I can tell you this point blank. If I had that smoking gun evidence, or if I had that smoking gun photograph that wasn't blurry, if I had that smoking gun video that actually proved something, I can honestly say, with the way this field is, I don't know, Rich, if I would release it.
I know. Because they're going to rip it to shreds and say it's fake anyway. It doesn't matter. You can't win. Nowadays, you can't. So now what we have to do is ride it out. See, about 5 years ago, people were like, oh, I want to investigate all this. I don't know anything about UFOs. The Internet's great, 5, 7, 8 years ago, whatever it was. And then then people started faking stuff. Oh, I can make money. I can get popular doing this. Then people started realizing, oh, my God, all these people are faking all these other videos? Well, I have no desire to look into it. So then ufology took a dive for a few years. And now it seems to be revamping up with a whole new type of thing called conspiracy. And a lot of people that are dying on their deathbeds coming out more than ever. More pilots coming out, more people from that worked in the government, whatever. But it's just another cycle that we have to work through. And maybe 5 years from now, this guy, Mr. Edmonds, people will look at him and say, man, that guy really told the truth, because maybe other people will come forward and said they had a shoot at an alien or stab one, or you don't know. I had a UFO picture I took in Sedona, coincidentally, in 2005. I didn't even know about it for a few years. I found it a few years later just going through some photographs on the digital camera. Well, I couldn't find any picture to duplicate it until 6 or 7 years after that. Some guy says, hey, I captured this in France. It looks just like what you captured. And lo and behold, it was almost identical. So You know, you hold on to the evidence, you hold on to John Edmund's story, you see what happens in 5 years from now. Maybe somebody will move there, and we'll have to kill some aliens, man, to validate his story. Some people just don't get validation till it's years later. It's a shame.
If you had the money, would you buy it? Would you buy the ranch?
If I had the money, hell yeah, I'd buy that ranch. But I would work him down to about $2 million. He'll take it. But if he was firm and I had $5 million, I would buy it anyway, of course. I'm surprised with all he said that the government or Bob Bigelow, whatever his name is, didn't swoop in and buy it.
Well, he said he was in talks with Bigelow, but Bigelow, for some reason, wanted him to stay on the ranch.
Oh, because he may be the attractor.
Exactly. And he's like, no, I'm getting out of here. So he has talked to Bigelow. He has talked to other government officials or people about this, but nothing has really come to fruition.
That's what he says. Well, maybe it's true. Who knows? Maybe talk with Bigelow's realtor. But I don't know, man. It's a very strange time we live in because you go to the movies, it's hard to tell what's real and fake. I mean, obviously, if somebody's flying, you know it's not real, but it's hard to determine what they're putting up on these UFO videos we see nowadays. You don't know if the government's making up fake stuff to make it look real. You know, they can make stuff even look like it's grainy. It would take an expert to know that with expert software. So they're getting better. They're getting smarter. People are getting wiser, though, at the same time. I just hope that if there are aliens, which I believe there are, I believe that they will come down and make themselves known soon. I hope it's before I die. But in all reality, Dave, I don't think it's ever going to happen. I think what's going to happen is mankind is going to really bombard on itself. There's going to be some sort of big war, something silly like that, and then they will wipe us out. Because you know that they're finding civilizations get wiped out every 10,000 years, 5,000 years. I mean, we've only been around a couple hundred. Well, I don't know about Canada, but how long's Canada been around? 200?
Just under. We just celebrated 150 this year.
Oh, I was way off. Yeah, I got to learn that before I get there. Well, you know, it is strange because they keep making these movies. And you asked me earlier, how can you tell what little nuggets they're dropping off? I like that one from Men in Black. That's an interesting one you brought up. But the other one is where they were sitting on the bench. And he goes, 500 years ago, you know, we thought the earth was flat, and then we found out it wasn't, and imagine what you'll know tomorrow. You know, you just found out there were aliens here on Earth an hour ago. Imagine what you'll know tomorrow. Imagine what we'll know tomorrow.
Now, I do have to ask you, as a ufologist, because I do consider you that, I know I'm doing it now. When you go to a department store, are you almost tempted now to buy the National Enquirer or Star magazine?
I look at them anyway, yeah. Not because of the movie, but I've always looked at the covers, and if I saw something I thought was interesting, I'd flip through it. I never bought one, though. But I've been to people's homes where they have them, and I've read them before. They're all fun. They're all interesting. And that's the fake news that's real. Can you imagine if that's where they're hiding all of it? That would be great.
I'm tempted because my parents love that smut. My grandmother buys them because they have this giant crossword puzzle in them that she likes to do. And now I'm thinking, damn it, how far behind on research am I that I haven't been able to, I haven't read into any UFOs and Sasquatch stories in National Enquirer or Star magazine.
Right. Well, why would you? Because you've been told your whole life, right? That those aren't real news stories, so why bother? But don't you think there's some sort of truth to a bunch of those fake stories? Don't you think? I think so.
1 second here. John T. on Twitter at #SpacedOutRadio is just absolutely mortified that I just saw The Matrix for the first time a few weeks ago. Yet he's asking, what are the odds that Dave still hasn't seen Men in Black? I have seen Men in Black. I have not seen Men in Black 2. I have not seen part 2 yet.
And there's 3.
Is there 3? See, this is how much out of the movie loop I am. So now I gotta go to Netflix and see if the Canadian Netflix, which is probably a C- compared to, on a grading scale compared to American Netflix. So now I got to go and see if they are up there, because I just have to, check them out. I really do. I really do.
Well, now you're going to get me looking at the National Enquirer and Star magazine when I go food shopping tomorrow. I'm definitely going to take a peek. That'd be actually a good segment for one of my shows. Yeah. I think I might do that. What's in the National Enquirer?
I think it's, I have no idea if it's true, okay?
Right.
And I realize all the skeptical people out there will be absolutely, saying, here they go, spreading BS out there. I almost said it, trying to figure out whether or not, here we are trying to bring, some legitimacy to these conversations, yet these idiots are sitting here trying to tell us to buy the National Enquirer and Star magazine. We're only going off the information that has been given to us by heavy-duty researchers in this field. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that I learned in my days in terrestrial radio, if you hear it once, it's a rumor. You hear it twice, it's got some legs. If you hear it the third time, damn it, that's a story. That's a story. So it's just something along those lines where am I going to go get a subscription to National Enquirer? No, I'm not. And I do not recommend anybody going to do that. However, I'm just wondering, is it maybe time to look? Do I need to start paying attention to this smut?
And then I also wonder, can you archive the years prior somewhere and, thumb through all the old ones too? Yeah, that's interesting. I'd like to see what they looked like when they first came out, what the first alien stories looked like. Maybe they match up to what's going on today. Might be interesting.
You never know. It would be interesting.
Right? That's what I'm saying. Stuff is cyclical. It comes back around, and then you get validation. Boom! 50 years later, we have flip phones. It's amazing.
Well, you got to get through. I'm telling you right now, you got to get through all of the Matt Lauer stories right now, because I'm on their website right now, and I'm looking for some juicy stuff here, and I'm not seeing anything. I really am not, and I'm not into celebrity gossip or crap like that. Come on, show me some aliens and Bigfoot lovers. Come on.
Somebody sent me a story today. I don't know who it was. They said a guy has had Bigfoot in his freezer for 57 years. I wonder who sent that to me. I think I'm going to... have you heard of this at all?
No.
Yeah, I forget who sent it to me. I'll see if I can find it and get it to you.
Yeah, I do that. I'd like to check that out, because I'm on a real fake news kick right now. I've been deleting the hell out of people on my Facebook page lately. And fake news, these people who are sending all of these, you have to share this to 175 people in the next hour and send it back to me included, they're gone. They have to be gone too. And now these people who are filling up my profile with these stupid questions, have you seen those? Have you seen the answers to questions? So on your profile, on the left-hand side, if you click there, okay, you scroll down right below your information and your photos and your friends. It says, there's a little box there. It says, answer a question to help people get to know you. And if I look on my profile, the question is, if I could live on the set of any movie, it would be, and then I'm supposed to answer this and it posts. Well, I'm getting flooded with these things. Flooded. I can't even see any news stories anymore because of these stupid things. So I've had to eliminate them too. I think I'm down probably 25 people in the last, probably since Friday. This past Friday, 25 people. I got to get rid of them. I don't have time.
Yeah, and then how about the ones that are always asking you to pray for somebody or this or that? I mean, I get it, but after seeing it, you get blind to it. It's like, God, enough already. And then I delete the people who show like violent videos too, where people are getting maimed, dogs getting whipped. I'm like, no, not for me. It's like, but we have to put them in jail. I'm like, just tell me about it. I don't need to see somebody's head get chopped off. I can't stand that stuff.
You know what? I will say this. I've watched my fair share of movies with people getting their heads chopped off, because when that whole head... No, seriously. When that whole head chopping thing was going off right at the beginning of, the Gulf War, or into Afghanistan with, Daniel Pearl and everything, because that was such a hot story in our newsroom, we were all waiting to see the video. And I'm gonna recommend this. If you've never seen a real human being getting their head chopped off, I don't recommend it. It is sucky viewing. But being in a newsroom, in order to report on it, you have to watch it.
Oh, God.
You know what I'm saying? And so we were on all these different sites trying to find this video, and one guy pulled it up, and then it was disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. But anyways, no, I'm on a real elimination kick on my Facebook right now, because I'm tired of the spam. I'm tired of if Johnny doesn't get enough likes, his cancer's not going to be cured if you don't say amen and share this post, because it means you don't believe in Jesus or whatever. Yeah, you got to go. You got to go. I have no time for that stuff on my Facebook page. So I've actually started switching over to a new social media site called Social Media Freedom.
And never heard of it.
It's brand new. It's made by a good friend of mine, Jure Reed, out of Las Vegas. And
cool.
he's just... I have seen Star Wars, John, on Twitter. I've seen Star Wars, the originals. And then I saw that stupid first one with that Jar Jar Binks character, and I turned it off. I turned it off because I'm not a fan of CGI. The beauty of the old Star Wars movies is everything was done by hand. I don't like CGI. I'm not a fan of it. I wasn't even a fan of, what's that James Cameron movie? Costs like,
Avatar?
That one. Good movie, but I hate CGI. I like real. Maybe if it looks a little bit fake, maybe I'm old school. I don't know. I like that old stuff. Like could you watch all these movies now that have like sharks, great white sharks that are CGI. They don't even look real. Jaws, Bruce the shark looked real. Or, even though we all knew it was fake, it looked somewhat real. And that's what I like.
I know what you mean, because it's just something that is not CGI. It looks genuine because it is genuine on film.
Exactly.
That's why.
Exactly.
Yeah, when it's too cleaned, it's too perfect. It's just something wrong with it.
Disappointing. Very disappointing.
Terrible.
I don't know if this hour was a complete waste of time or if we actually accomplished anything, but Rich Giordano, always fun to have you on the air, man. That was a fast hour.
That was fast. Yeah, it was fun to be back for an hour. Thanks.
Could you do me a favor?
No. Yeah, what?
Please tell our listeners about the Paranormal Code.
Oh, well, yeah, of course. The Paranormal Code is a show on thefringe.fm. You can listen 2 nights a week, Sunday, 10 Eastern, and Thursday, 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific. And I'm on 2 nights a week. That's it. Just another one of your run-of-the-mill UFO paranormal shows.
You're that guy, my friend. Rich, you hold on. I'm going to wrap this thing up. We want to say thanks to Rich Giordano from the Paranormal Code coming on this show for hour number 3. And then our guest the first 2 hours, all the way from England, author Robbie Graham. His book, Silverscreen Saucers, can be found at any online bookstore like Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I highly suggest you check it out. His website, robbiegraham.uk. If you want to check out his website, highly hope you do. Tomorrow night on the program, Alfred Lambermont Weber is going to be here. We're getting into time travel, futurism, exopolitics. Who knows where Mr. Alfred will take us? Love the man. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern times. SOR Trivia. Alfred was our first ever guest on this show back on November 30th, 2014. I want to say thank you to everyone who is supporting our GoFundMe page, GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. All of you that are helping put this together, and those of you who haven't but are still sharing our progress with everyone, thank you so much for doing that. I want to say a big thank you to everybody who is listening at home, in their vehicles, at work, on Twitter at #SpacedOutRadio, in the SOR Space Travelers group on Facebook, and the Spreaker chat. You guys are beautiful. Thank you so much for being a part of this. I want to say a big shout out to our social media. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Instagram, Dave Scott SOR. All of our archives are on youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. And to all our listeners, I love you all. We'll talk to you in 21 hours from now, because together, my friends, we own the night. See you tomorrow. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to rock us home. See you later.